Greetings, fellow fans. You're tuned into Eclipse Wizardry, presenting to you today, Astoria Greengrass accidentally kissed Harry at age 9 and ancient Pureblood contract activated forever. Show some love by liking and subscribing. Enjoy the story ahead. Chapter 1. The Compact. The Ministry of Magic's Winter Gala was the kind of event that existed primarily so that important people could remind each other they were important. The ballroom on level 2 had been transformed, enchanted snowflakes drifting from a ceiling charmed to look like a midnight sky, long tables groaning with food that nobody actually ate because eating at galas was considered gauche, and hundreds of witches and wizards in their finest dress robes doing the delicate dance of being seen without appearing to want to be seen. Cyrus Greengrass moved through it all like a man who'd been born knowing the steps. He was tall, silver-threaded at the temples, and carried himself with the particular brand of quiet authority that old money produced when it was managed well. His wife, Ivana, floated beside him in midnight blue robes, her blonde hair swept up in a style that had probably taken 2 hours and looked entirely effortless. Their eldest daughter, Daphne, aged 11, walked beside her mother with the composure of a girl who had been attending these events since she could walk and had learned early that composure was armor. Their youngest, Astoria, was 9 years old and had been told 3 times tonight already to stop touching the enchanted ice sculptures. "They're warm," she said, for the 3rd time, pulling her hand back from the swan whose wings had begun to melt slightly under her persistent examination. "That's interesting. Why would ice be warm? That's a contradiction." "Astoria." Her mother's voice was gentle but final. "I'm just observing." "Observe with your eyes." Astoria clasped her hands behind her back and observed with her eyes. She was smaller than Daphne had been at 9, fine-boned and fair, with dark hair that never quite did what it was supposed to and gray eyes that missed very little. She wore green robes trimmed with silver because her father had chosen them and her father always chose green and silver, and she hadn't argued because she'd already spent her argument budget for the evening on the ice sculpture question. The ballroom was full of people she recognized from her father's study, faces she'd memorized from photographs in the Daily Prophet, names she'd learned to attach to political positions the way other children learned to attach names to Quidditch players. She recognized Lucius Malfoy near the far end of the room, white-blonde and impeccable, speaking to 2 other men with the careful economy of someone who never wasted words. She recognized Cornelius Fudge, the minister, working the room with the enthusiasm of a man who genuinely loved his own parties. She recognized Albus Dumbledore standing near a column, silver beard and robes that were, for once, muted, charcoal gray, as though he'd decided to blend in tonight, which fooled no one because Albus Dumbledore was incapable of blending in. And she recognized, because she'd seen his photograph approximately 600 times in the last 2 years, Harry Potter. He was standing near the drinks table with a man she didn't know, a broad, cheerful-looking man with a weathered face and kind eyes. Harry was wearing dress robes that were slightly too big for him, black and clearly new in the way that suggested someone had bought them in a hurry, and he was holding a glass of pumpkin juice with the expression of someone who had been told to stay in one place and was weighing the cost-benefit of not doing that. He looked nothing like the photographs. The photographs showed a symbol, the boy who lived, glasses and scar and the weight of a whole world's hope pressed into the face of a child. The boy by the drinks table looked like he'd rather be somewhere else and was skilled enough at concealing it that only someone paying very close attention would notice. Astoria paid very close attention to most things. "Father," she said quietly, "why is Harry Potter here?" Cyrus glanced across the room. Something in his expression shifted, just slightly, just enough that Astoria noticed. "He attends ministry functions occasionally. He's a ward of the state in some technical sense. They like to display him. That seems unkind. That seems political." He guided her forward with a hand on her shoulder. "Come. There are people I need to speak with." The people Cyrus needed to speak with were a rotating collection of men in expensive robes who all spoke in the carefully neutral tones of people saying important things without technically saying anything. Astoria stood at her father's side for 12 minutes, which she counted, and then her mother was absorbed into a separate conversation involving Madame Longbottom and the question of the upcoming Weisengamot session, and Daphne was whisked away to be admired by various family friends who liked to tell her she'd grown, and Astoria was, momentarily, alone. She considered the ice sculptures again. She decided against it. She drifted instead, which was something she was good at, moving through spaces without drawing attention, listening to things that weren't meant for her, cataloging information like she was building a library inside her head. She learned that the Parkinson family was unhappy with a recent trade agreement. She learned that someone named Rosier had been passed over for a department position and was making his feelings known. She learned that the enchanted snow on the ceiling was produced by a ward on the 4th floor that needed recalibration every 6 hours, which she thought was sloppy spell work. She was navigating around a cluster of Weisengamot members when the floor caught her. Or rather, her heel caught the hem of her own robe, which caught the floor, which sent her pitching forward at a velocity that was entirely undignified. She had a brief, vivid awareness of the fact that she was about to measure her length on the ministry ballroom floor in front of approximately 300 people, followed by the equally vivid awareness that someone had stepped directly into her path. She hit Harry Potter's shoulder first. Her hand caught his arm. The momentum swung her face around and her mouth, her lips, pressed against his cheek. Just for a second. Just long enough. They both froze. He turned to look at her. Up close, she could see that his eyes were green, actually green, not the muddy hazel that photographs flatten them to, but a vivid, startling green like something alive. He had a small cut above his left eyebrow that was mostly healed, and the scar on his forehead was less dramatic in person than it was in legend. "Sorry," Astoria said, stepping back and straightening with as much dignity as she could locate on short notice. "I tripped." "It's okay," he said. He seemed uncertain about something. "Are you all right?" "Perfectly fine." She smoothed her robes. "Astoria Greengrass." He blinked. "Harry Potter. I know who you are." "Right." A pause. "I don't know who you are." "Sorry." "That's all right." She studied him with the frank assessment of a 9-year-old who hadn't yet learned that frank assessment was considered rude. "You look tired." He looked startled, then oddly amused. "It's been a long night." "It's only 8 o'clock." "It's been a long kind of night." She almost smiled. She was prevented from doing so by what happened next. The magic hit them both at the same time. It wasn't painful, it was more like the sudden pressure change when you descend too quickly, a deep internal shift that had nothing to do with your own heartbeat but was happening inside it anyway. Astoria felt something settle behind her sternum like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known was there. Across from her, Harry went very still, his hand pressing flat against his chest with an expression that suggested he was experiencing something similar. The man who'd been standing with Harry, the broad, weathered one, was at Harry's side in an instant. "Harry? You all right, lad?" "Something just," Harry pressed his lips together. "Something happened." "Mr. Potter." Cyrus Greengrass's voice came from directly behind Astoria, and she turned to find her father standing there with an expression she had never seen on his face before, something complex and calculating that was working very hard to appear merely polite. "I believe there may be something we need to discuss." The room had not stopped. The enchanted snow was still drifting. The conversations were still weaving their careful webs. But in this small radius, Harry, Astoria, Cyrus, and the weathered man who'd introduced himself to Cyrus as Alistair Moody with a handshake like a steel trap, the world had rearranged itself around something invisible. "What just happened?" Harry asked. He said it the way Astoria imagined he said most things, directly, with a complete absence of the social lubrication that most people applied to uncomfortable questions. She found she respected that. "There's a room," Cyrus said quietly. "We should speak privately." The room Cyrus found was a small conference chamber off the main corridor, furnished with chairs that nobody had sat in recently and a long table that held a single floating candle. Moody came with them because he declined to be excluded, which he made clear by simply following and establishing a position near the door that suggested he would require physical removal to shift. Cyrus did not attempt to remove him, which Astoria noted as interesting. Her father was not a man who conceded ground easily. Astoria Greengrass appeared within minutes, drawn perhaps by some instinct particular to mothers at formal events, and stood beside Cyrus with her hand on Astoria's shoulder. "Tell me what you know about betrothal compacts," Cyrus said to the room in general. Moody's magical eye swiveled. "Old magic. Pre-ministry. Some of them are older than Hogwarts. The Greengrass family has one," Cyrus said. "Filed in the family grimoire in 1312 by Aldrich Greengrass, who was apparently of the romantic opinion that some bonds transcend bloodlines." The last words came out with a careful neutrality that suggested his personal opinion of Aldrich was not entirely charitable. It was written as a legacy compact, not arranged, but recognized. The magic identifies the match. It requires initiation by a kiss. "I'm 9, Astoria said. "I'm aware," her father said. "A cheek kiss," Moody said flatly. The compact activated over a cheek kiss between two children at a party. "Apparently the magic is not particular about location," Cyrus said, "only about intent. My daughter was falling." "She wasn't," he paused. "It wasn't, it was accidental," Astoria said. "I tripped." "I know." Her father looked at her then, and the expression on his face was one she would remember for a long time, not anger, but something that looked like a man watching the future rearrange itself into a shape he hadn't planned for. "I know it was." Harry had been silent through all of this, standing beside Moody with his arms at his sides and his face doing that very controlled thing that Astoria was starting to identify as his version of composed. She could see him processing, taking it in, sorting it, deciding what to think about it. "What does it actually mean?" he asked. "The compact. What does it do?" "In the short term, very little," Cyrus said. "Your children. The compact's effects are gradual. Over time you'll develop awareness of each other. A degree of magical resonance. At majority, 17, the compact moves to its completion phase. At that point it requires formal acknowledgement from both parties. Or?" Cyrus met Harry's gaze. "Or the magic enforces it." "Enforces it how?" "Neither of you would be capable of forming any other permanent magical bond. No other betrothal, no other marriage contract, nothing that requires the full commitment of your magic. The compact holds that space. It doesn't compel you to choose each other, it simply ensures no one else can claim what it has designated as spoken for." Moody had gone very quiet, which from Alastair Moody was more alarming than noise. "Can it be dissolved?" "Perhaps." Cyrus said the word the way people say words when the answer is no, but they haven't entirely given up on the idea. "There are procedures. They're not simple." "I'm 9, Astoria said again, because she felt this point needed consistent emphasis. "You'll stop being 9 eventually," Daphne said from the doorway, where she had apparently been standing for the last 30 seconds because she was Daphne and Daphne always found the important rooms. She came in without being invited, which she also did regularly, and sat down in one of the chairs with her 11-year-old composure firmly in place. "I heard enough." "What are you going to do about it, Father?" "I'm going to look into the matter very carefully," Cyrus said, "and determine the most appropriate course of action for our family." "Which means you haven't decided yet," Daphne said. "Daphne. I'm just translating." She looked at Harry Potter across the table with the frank assessment of an older Greengrass sister. "You're smaller than I expected." "I get that a lot," Harry said. "Do you understand what a betrothal compact means in terms of pureblood law?" "About 30 seconds ago I didn't know betrothal compacts existed," Harry said. "Then you'll need to learn." She said it without condescension, as a practical statement of fact. It's not optional. If this compact is registered with Gringotts, and ancient family magic usually is, then it will become a matter of legal record within the week. People will know. Moody made a sound that wasn't quite a word. People, Astoria said, meaning the people in that ballroom. Some of them. Daphne's gaze was steady. Including people who'll consider it a problem. Cyrus placed a hand on the table. That's enough for tonight. Mr. Potter, I will be contacting your guardian, Albus Dumbledore, I presume. I'll tell him myself, Harry said. Cyrus regarded him for a moment. Whatever he'd expected from the 9-year-old boy by the drinks table, it apparently hadn't been this particular brand of matter-of-fact steadiness. Very well. My solicitor will be in contact with the relevant parties early next week. Harry nodded. He looked at Astoria, just briefly, just for a second. I really am sorry. About all of, he gestured vaguely at the room, this. You didn't cause it, she said. I fell. Still. Don't apologize for magic, Astoria said. It doesn't care about apologies. She held out her hand with the formality she'd been raised to and he shook it, which struck her as a slightly absurd thing to be doing given the circumstances but also the correct thing, somehow. The enchanted snow was still drifting when they returned to the ballroom. Harry went back to Moody's side. Astoria went back to her parents' side. The gala continued in its precise and calculated way. But something had changed, in the way that things change when a key turns, not loudly, not dramatically, but absolutely. And there's no unturning it once it's done. That night, in the Greengrass family townhouse in Kensington, Astoria sat on her bedroom floor with her knees pulled to her chest and her back against the bed and thought about it very carefully, the way she thought about everything. She'd kissed Harry Potter on the cheek. By accident. And now there was something in her chest that felt like a new compass needle, pointing at something she couldn't see yet. She decided she wasn't frightened of it. Fear was for things you couldn't examine, and she intended to examine this very thoroughly. In his room at number 4, Privet Drive, Harry lay on his back staring at the ceiling with one hand still pressed flat against his chest. The Dursleys had retired hours ago. The house was its particular brand of silent, that repressive, aggressive quiet that wasn't peace at all. He'd told Moody he'd tell Dumbledore. He would. Tomorrow he'd write a letter and explain the whole bizarre thing and Dumbledore would probably say something annoyingly cryptic about the nature of ancient magic and destiny and Harry would feel no more informed than before. But right now, alone with it, he let himself actually sit with the feeling. It wasn't unpleasant. That was the strange thing. It was like having a window in a room you'd thought was solid wall. You didn't know what was on the other side yet. But the window was there. Light was coming through. He turned over and went to sleep, and for once he didn't dream about green light. Dumbledore's response to Harry's letter arrived 2 days later. It was, as predicted, cryptic, something about the marvelous unpredictability of old magic and the importance of approaching new developments with an open heart rather than a closed fist. But buried in the elegant prose was something concrete. Dumbledore had already heard from Cyrus Greengrass's solicitor. The compact was registered. It was real. And, Dumbledore wrote this with what felt like particular care, it was not, in the headmaster's opinion, cause for alarm. Ancient recognized match compacts were not coercive instruments. They did not force feeling. They simply waited. The magic, Harry, has made a statement. What you do with that statement is entirely your own affair. Harry read this 3 times, folded the letter, and put it under his mattress beside the photograph of his parents. Entirely his own affair. He'd had very few things in his life that were entirely his own affair. He found, somewhat to his own surprise, that he didn't mind the sound of it. The solicitors moved, as solicitors do, with the grinding precision of institutions that have been managing the affairs of powerful families for centuries and intend to continue doing so. A formal notification was filed with Gringotts. The compact's activation was entered into the Greengrass family legal record and cross-referenced with the Potter family vault, which had its own legal representative, a sharp-eyed goblin named Sharpclaw who communicated through Dumbledore's office and seemed personally offended on behalf of the Potter legacy that no one had been monitoring this sort of thing properly. Within a fortnight, the notification had propagated through the relevant channels. Meaning, people knew. People meant, initially, the select stratum of Pureblood society that monitored Gringotts records the way traders monitored market prices, constantly and with professional suspicion. It filtered outward from there in the way that all information in the wizarding world filtered outward, quickly, imperfectly, and always with embellishment. By the time it reached Lucius Malfoy's ears, it had acquired a narrative. By the time it reached the lower circles of the Death Eater network, through channels Cyrus Greengrass did not know existed, it had acquired a problem. Theodore Knott Sr. was 52 years old, slim and precise and possessed of a mind like a well-kept filing system. He'd served Voldemort with the kind of intellectual devotion that was more dangerous than passion because it was unaffected by emotion. He'd survived the First War. He'd navigated the aftermath. And he understood, with the clarity of a man who had spent 30 years thinking about power, that the compact between Harry Potter and a daughter of the ancient house of Greengrass was not a curiosity. It was a threat. Not to him personally. Not immediately. But Voldemort's return, and Knott had no doubts about the return, none, the Dark Mark's slow reawakening told him everything he needed to know, would require the consolidation of the old families. The Greengrasses had always been careful, never marked, never committed, but never openly opposed. Useful. The compact changed that arithmetic. A formal magical bond, even an unactivated one, between a Greengrass and Harry Potter meant the Greengrasses had, however accidentally, committed. He began, quietly, to make inquiries. About dissolution procedures. About the limits of old compact magic. About what might happen if a compact's conditions were disrupted before its completion phase. He was very thorough. He always was. The Greengrass family home for winter holiday was a manor house in Wiltshire, not ostentatious, not the kind of place that announced itself. It had been in the family since the late 1600s and wore its age with a certain understated confidence, like a man who had no need to dress well because everyone already knew who he was. The grounds went back 300 meters into managed woodland, and in late December they were deep in frost, the trees standing like careful thoughts and the air coming off the grass sharp enough to taste. Astoria spent the first week of holiday doing what she did every holiday, which was reading everything in the family library that she hadn't read yet. This took longer than it did for most 9-year-olds, who would have finished the available material years ago, because the Greengrass library was extensive and Astoria read fast and retained everything, which meant she'd already read most of it and had to keep finding the less obvious shelves. She found the grimoire on the third day. It was on a shelf in the back corner of the East Reading Room, between a 1782 almanac of magical creatures and a slim volume of property law that was so boring she'd previously used it as a step stool. The grimoire was old, properly old, the kind of old that felt different in your hands, a weight that wasn't entirely physical. Dark leather, no title on the spine, the family seal embossed on the front in faded gold. She sat down on the window seat with it and spent 4 hours with it. The betrothal compact was on page 47. It had been written in a spidery, slanting hand that she could read because she'd taught herself to read old script 2 summers ago on a personal project involving a medieval herbology text. Aldrich Greengrass had written it with evident conviction, cross-referencing an obscure piece of pre-Norman magic that Astoria had to piece together from context because the primary source wasn't in the library. The compact didn't, in Aldrich's telling, create the bond. That was the thing everyone seemed to be getting wrong. It recognized one that already existed in potential, a resonance between 2 magical signatures that had an uncommon compatibility. The kiss was just the key. What the key opened was what had always been there, waiting. 2 magics that rhyme, Aldrich had written, which was either profound or pretentious, Astoria couldn't decide. The compact does not make them rhyme. It only listens for the rhyme. When it hears it, it marks it. The marking is irrevocable because the resonance itself is irrevocable. You cannot unrhyme two things that already rhyme. She read this twice. Then she went to find Daphne. Her sister was in the sitting room by the fire, nominally reading but actually staring at the flames in the way she did when she was thinking about something she didn't want to be thinking about. Daphne was 11 and had already been sorted into Slytherin in September and had come back from her first term at Hogwarts with the composed efficiency of someone who had found their natural habitat. "Did you know the compact doesn't create the bond?" Astoria said, sitting down across from her. "It just recognizes one that was already there." Daphne looked up. "Where did you read that?" "The grimoire." "Father didn't want you reading the grimoire." "Father didn't specifically say I couldn't read the grimoire. He said not to touch his study without asking." The grimoire was in the library. Astoria met her sister's gaze with the particular tranquility of someone who has thought through their justifications. "Did you know?" A pause. "I had a feeling," Daphne said. The way Father explained it, it didn't sound like a trap that closes on anyone who happens to trip. It sounded like something that was waiting for the right two people. "So it's not an accident," Astoria said. "The trip was an accident," Daphne said. "The activation might not have been." Astoria thought about the green eyes. The slightly too big dress robes. The way he'd said entirely his own affair, well, she didn't know he'd said that, but she somehow felt it was the kind of thing he would say. "He doesn't seem like someone who needs protecting," she said. "No," Daphne agreed. "And he's not pure blood. Father's not happy." "Father will manage," Daphne said, with a confidence that was either sisterly faith or tactical optimism. "He always manages." She paused. "What did you make of him?" "Actually." Astoria considered. She thought about the drinks table and the expression of someone calculating the cost-benefit of not staying put. She thought about him pressing his hand to his chest the way she'd pressed hers, the both of them feeling the same impossible thing at the same moment. She thought about Don't Apologize for Magic and the way he'd looked at her, not the way people looked at her father's daughter or at a small girl in green robes, but just, looked at her. "He's real," she said finally. Daphne raised an eyebrow. Most people in that ballroom weren't. They were all performing something. He was just, there. Actually there. She paused. It was interesting. "You're 9, Daphne said, "and you're already analyzing Harry Potter." "I analyze everything." "I know." But Daphne's expression softened slightly. "He's got a hard road in front of him. You know that." "I know." "And you've got," Daphne stopped. The fire snapped. Neither of them said the word curse because it lived in the Greengrass household the way bad weather lived in a place you'd grown up, always present, never discussed directly, felt in everything. "I know that too," Astoria said quietly. The blood curse that ran in the Greengrass line came through the maternal side, and it had skipped Daphne with the casual cruelty of genetic chance and landed on Astoria, and the family knew and never spoke of it, and Astoria had found out by reading the medical notes in her mother's writing desk at age 7 because she had been, even then, very thorough. She didn't think about it the way other people seemed to think she should think about it, with fear or grief or anger. She thought about it practically. There was a limited quantity of time in any life. She intended to use hers at full capacity. "It doesn't change anything," she said. "For me, I mean. About any of it." Daphne looked at her for a long moment with the expression older sisters get when they are feeling something they have decided not to show. "No," she said finally. "I suppose it doesn't." The fire settled lower. Outside, the frost-covered grounds were completely still, the trees standing in their careful rows like witnesses to something that had not yet happened. Astoria went back to the library and kept reading. She was 9 years old, bound by ancient magic to a boy she'd met for approximately 4 minutes, possessed of a blood curse that she refused to be defined by, and in possession of more information than most adults around her gave her credit for. She felt, genuinely and without irony, that this was a promising start. Harry's letter arrived on January 3rd. She found it on the breakfast table, all delivered, slightly crumpled, addressed in handwriting that was clear but not elegant, the product of someone who'd learned to write properly but was always in a slight hurry. Dear Astoria, Dumbledore told me I should probably write to you, and I've started this letter about 4 times, so I'm just going to stop trying to make it sound right and write it properly. I don't know much about the compact. I'm learning. I think we should probably both learn, and it seems weird to learn it separately when it affects both of us. I don't know you. You don't know me. I'd like to change that, if you're willing. Not because of the magic, or not only because. But because you told me not to apologize for magic, and that was honestly the most sensible thing anyone said to me that entire evening, which admittedly isn't a high bar because most of that evening was people saying nothing in as many words as possible. I hope your holidays have been good. Harry Astoria read the letter 3 times. Then she got a piece of parchment and her best quill and wrote back. Harry, your letter was better than you think it was. The part about people saying nothing in many words is accurate. I've been going to those events since I could walk, and you identified the fundamental problem in 1 sentence, which suggests your instincts are good. I agree about learning separately being wasteful. I've been reading our family grimoire. I'll tell you what I've found if you tell me what Dumbledore said. My holidays have been productive. I hope yours have been less unpleasant than the general impression of your home situation suggests. Astoria Greengrass. She sealed it, sent it with the family owl, and went back to her books. The reply came in 2 days. Astoria, what general impression of my home situation? She smiled. Just slightly. Harry, I read the newspapers. Right. Well. Yes. I suppose they're not entirely wrong about that part. Though the journalist from Which Weekly who described my bedroom as probably a cramped but charming boyish den has clearly never seen my bedroom. What did you find in the grimoire? She told him. He asked good questions. She answered them. He answered hers. By the time Hogwarts letters arrived in late July 1991, his first, her second, they had exchanged 43 letters, argued twice, once about Quidditch, once about whether the Ministry's approach to creature rights was pragmatically or morally bankrupt. Astoria held it was both. Harry agreed but said both still felt insufficient, and had developed a correspondence that felt, to Astoria, like something it would be very inconvenient to give up. Which was, she recognized, exactly what the compact had been designed to produce. Aldrich Greengrass, writing in 1312, would probably have been pleased. She was still not sure how she felt about that. But she kept writing. The summer passed in the way summers pass when you're waiting for something, faster than you'd like, slower than it feels. The compact's presence was subtle but real, the compass needle feeling she'd had since January now simply a part of her internal landscape, like knowing which direction was north. She didn't think about it constantly. It was just there. On September 1st, she stood on platform 9 3/4 in her second year and felt it shift slightly, a change in directional pressure, like the needle adjusting when the destination got closer. Somewhere on this platform, Harry Potter had just crossed through the barrier. She didn't look for him. She had her own things to manage, finding her compartment, depositing her trunk, locating Millie Bulstrode who she was supposed to be meeting by the front carriages. She was methodical. But when the Hogwarts Express began to move and the platform slid past her window and she caught a brief, fractional glimpse of a dark-haired boy with slightly too big robes being pulled enthusiastically toward a carriage by a tall red-haired boy, she felt the compass needle settle, quite precisely, like a thing that had been waiting to do exactly that. He was here. She turned back to her book. She had 40 minutes before they arrived at Hogwarts. She intended to use them productively. But something in her chest had quietly, irrevocably shifted. Chapter 2, the named the Hogwarts Express arrived at Hogsmeade Station at exactly 7:30, and Harry Potter stepped off it into the Scottish autumn and thought, oh. He'd been told about Hogwarts. Hagrid had described it with the particular enthusiasm of a man who considered it the finest place on earth, which made objectivity unlikely, and Dumbledore's letter had mentioned it with that infuriating elegance that made everything sound inevitable. Even the older Weasley twins on the train had contributed their opinions, which were primarily about the kitchen entrance and the best route to avoid Filch on weekday evenings. None of it had prepared him for the actual thing. It rose out of the darkness above the lake like something that had always been there and knew it, towers and battlements and lit windows casting gold onto the water, the whole mass of it reflected below so that for a moment it looked like two castles, one real and one dreaming. The night smelled like pine and cold water and something electric that Harry's magic responded to the way a tuning fork responds to its note, a resonance, a recognition. Fur's years. Fur's years over here. Hagrid was approximately the size of a large shed and twice as warm, and Harry found him immediately because finding Hagrid in a crowd was never difficult. He went toward him with Ron Weasley at his shoulder, Ron, who he'd met 4 hours ago and already felt like he'd known considerably longer, which was its own sort of magic. The boats crossed the lake and the castle got larger and more impossible with every stroke, and Harry sat in the prow with the cold spray on his face and felt, for the first time in his life, like he was going somewhere he was supposed to be. He didn't look for Astoria. He didn't expect to see her, she was a second year, already in a compartment he hadn't found, already part of Hogwarts in a way he wasn't yet. But the compass sense that had become familiar over 10 months of letters had shifted during the crossing, closer, more specific, less like north and more like there, and he noted it the way he noted things he needed to think about later. Later. There was a lot of later ahead of him. Right now there were stone steps and a vast entrance hall and a woman named Professor McGonagall who looked at 41st years with the controlled composure of someone who had done this 38 times and still took it seriously. The Sorting Hat sang. Harry listened with more attention than most of his classmates because information about the houses was information about the world he was entering, and he'd learned early that understanding the world you were entering was the difference between managing it and being managed by it. The hat mentioned bravery and cunning and loyalty and wit, and somewhere in the back of his mind he was already thinking, these aren't opposites. Most interesting people have more than one. When they called his name the hall went the kind of quiet that has texture. He sat under the hat and it spoke to him privately, in that dry interior voice, and told him he had plenty of courage and a not inconsiderable mind and that the hunger to prove himself looked a great deal like ambition when you examined it properly. He thought, Gryffindor, clear and firm, not because he feared Slytherin but because every instinct he had was pointing that direction, and he'd learned to trust his instincts. Gryffindor. The table erupted. He sat down between a girl named Hermione Granger, who had answered every question in their shared charms textbook in the margins, and Ron, who was already eating, and allowed himself to feel something that was adjacent to happiness. Up at the Slytherin table, a second-year girl with dark hair and gray eyes noted the sorting with the particular attention of someone who had been following Harry Potter's correspondence for 10 months and could therefore place his character within a sorting category with reasonable accuracy. She had, in fact, predicted Gryffindor in a letter 3 weeks ago. She turned back to her plate. Beside her, Daphne was eating with the serene efficiency of someone who had decided to stop being interested in events at other tables. Gryffindor, Astoria said quietly. I know, Daphne said. I said it would be. I know that too. Astoria ate her roast chicken and thought about the compass needle, which had done something specific at the moment of Gryffindor, not moved, exactly, but brightened. Become more definite. Like a voice you've only heard in letters suddenly speaking in a room. She decided not to think about it too much and asked Millicent Bulstrode about her summer instead. The first weeks of term established patterns that would persist for years. Harry's name, it turned out, was a weather system. Wherever it went, something was either brewing or breaking. He was in the Daily Prophet twice in the first month, which Astoria read with the critical attention she gave all journalism and found wanting on basic factual standards. He apparently made the Gryffindor Quidditch team, which she'd also predicted. She told him this in a letter. "I predicted this in my September 14th letter. You told me you'd never been on a broom. I told you you'd be on the Quidditch team. Those aren't contradictory statements." His reply, "How? Your letters suggest good spatial reasoning, above-average reflex language, and a personality that finds sitting still more difficult than most people find action. Those are seeker traits. Also Hagrid mentioned you to McGonagall and she's been looking for a seeker since Wood took over. She was going to notice you eventually." A longer pause than usual before the next letter. "That's either very impressive or slightly alarming. The two aren't mutually exclusive. They didn't meet in person until the third week of October. The library, which was neutral ground, the one place in Hogwarts where Slytherin and Gryffindor students occupied the same space without the tribal geography of the Great Hall applying. Madame Pants enforced a silence that flattened house politics, and most students respected it because Madame Pants was, in her particular way, terrifying. Astoria was there because she was always in the library. She had a table near the back wall where the light was good and the foot traffic was low, and she'd been there since 4 o'clock working through a Transfiguration essay that was due Thursday and that she was writing with a thoroughness Professor McGonagall had not technically requested but would, Astoria suspected, appreciate. She heard the footsteps before she saw him, 2 sets, slightly uneven, one faster than the other. She identified the faster set as belonging to someone who moved with instinctive awareness of space, like someone who'd learned early to be ready to move quickly. Harry Potter and Hermione Granger appeared around the end of the shelf, Hermione carrying a stack of books that was structurally ambitious and Harry carrying one that he was clearly still deciding whether to open. They found a table 2 rows from Astoria's. Hermione sat immediately and began organizing her materials with the precision of a field general deploying troops. Harry sat, opened his book, read one paragraph, and looked up at the ceiling. Astoria watched for exactly 3 seconds before returning to her essay. 8 minutes later she was aware of him looking at her. She finished her sentence before looking back. He was watching her with an expression of someone who has just placed a face they recognize from a different context. She watched the recognition arrive fully, and when it did something in his face changed, not dramatically, but definitely. Something settled. He got up. Hermione, absorbed in her own work, didn't notice. He came to her table and stopped opposite her and said, very quietly because they were in the library, "Astoria Greengrass." "Harry Potter," she said, equally quiet. "I thought it might be you." He nodded at the chair across from her. "May I?" She moved her ink bottle to make room. He sat down. Up close, in person, he was different from the platform glimpse and different again from the boy at the Ministry Gala 2 years ago. He'd grown, still not tall, but present in a way that went beyond physical space. His eyes were the same startling green. He had ink on his left hand and a small scrape on his chin that looked like it might be Quidditch-related. He looked at her with that direct, unperforming attention she'd noticed at the gala and recognized from his letters, like he wasn't trying to be anything in particular, which in the world she'd grown up in was almost bizarre. "You look different," he said. "Then what?" "Then I imagined from the letters." "What did you imagine?" He considered this with apparent seriousness. "Taller." "I'm 10. I know. I'm 11. I'm also not tall. I don't have a position on this." Something in Astoria shifted slightly, the same quality she'd identified at the gala, that realness, but amplified by familiarity. 2 years of letters had built a person in her mind, and now here was the actual version, and the version was, she decided, better. "Your Transfiguration essay from last Tuesday was wrong," she said. He blinked. "How do you know about my Transfiguration essay?" "Hermione told someone who told someone. The specific error is in your definition of structural transposition. You conflated the external and internal models." He was quiet for a moment. "I got an acceptable." You should have gotten an exceeds expectations. The rest of it was good. Just the definition. Right. He looked at her with what she'd come to think of as his processing expression. Why are you telling me this? Because it's useful information. Most Slytherins wouldn't bother. I'm not most Slytherins. He almost smiled. It was the same almost smile she'd gotten at the Ministry Gala, like he was checking first to make sure the situation actually warranted it before committing fully. No, he said. You're not. They sat in the library for an hour. Hermione eventually registered Harry's absence from their table and came to investigate and found him deep in a conversation about the theoretical underpinnings of switching spells with a Slytherin second year, and stood there for a moment with the expression of someone recalculating something. Astoria had seen that expression on intelligent people often enough to recognize it. Hermione Granger, she said, with a tone that meant, I know who you are, this is acknowledgement, not introduction. Astoria Greengrass, Hermione said, with a tone that meant, I know who you are too, and I've been thinking about what that means since September 1st, sit down, Astoria said. Your essay is also wrong, but in a more interesting way. Hermione sat down. Harry looked between them with the expression of someone watching two weather fronts approach each other and genuinely uncertain what kind of collision was coming. What came was Hermione Granger finding, possibly for the first time at Hogwarts, someone who could keep up with her in a straight-line academic discussion. By the time the library was closing, the two of them had demolished and rebuilt two separate arguments about transfiguration theory, and Harry had, with no one particularly noticing, corrected his essay definition in his notes. She's extraordinary, Hermione said to Harry as they walked back up to Gryffindor Tower. I know, Harry said. She's 10. I know that too. Hermione looked at him sideways. What's it actually like? The compact. Does it feel like anything? Harry thought about how to answer that, the same way he thought about his letters, with the particular care of someone who'd learned that words meant things and imprecise words caused problems. Like a compass, he said finally. Doesn't tell me what to think or feel. Just tells me where north is. That's an interesting way to put it. She'd say it better. She'd say it more precisely, Hermione said. That's not the same thing. He considered this. No. I suppose it's not. The rest of first year happened around them, the troll on Halloween, which Harry dealt with because of course he did, and which resulted in Hermione's friendship being cemented in the way that life-threatening situations always cement friendships faster than ordinary time allows. The Quidditch season, where Harry caught his first snitch in the fastest first-year debut since, some year Astoria looked up and reported to him in a letter with characteristic precision. The slow creep of the Philosopher's Stone situation, which Harry noticed and tracked with the instincts of someone who'd been reading threat indicators since he was old enough to understand that the Dursleys' moods were danger signals. Astoria watched from her own angle. She had her own networks. Slytherin had information channels that Gryffindor largely didn't know existed, and Astoria had been using them since first year. She knew about Quirrell before Harry did, in the sense of knowing there was something wrong with him. She passed the information through a letter written in the abbreviated private language they developed over 2 years of correspondence. Something's wrong with the Dada teacher. Not the obvious wrong, not incompetent, the opposite. The stutter is completely inconsistent. Left hand always gloved, even indoors. Whatever it is, it's been there since September. Harry's reply came back within hours, which meant he'd read it immediately. I know about Quirrell. There's more to it. Don't investigate independently, not yet. This was, Astoria recognized, the first time he'd given her a direct instruction rather than exchanged information. She sat with it for a moment, turning it over. She wrote back, that's reasonable. But if you're going somewhere I'm not aware of, I'd like to know. His reply, fair. 2 words. But they meant, I hear you, and I'll tell you. She found that this was enough. When June arrived and the school year ended, Harry was alive and the stone was destroyed and Quirrell was dead and Voldemort was once again not quite gone, and Astoria read the brief official account in the Prophet and the much longer, far more honest version in Harry's letter and felt the compass needle pull hard enough that she actually put her hand on her chest, the way she'd done at the Ministry Gala 2 years ago. He was fine. He'd handled it. He'd gone into the dungeons with 2 11-year-olds and come out the other side with his magic and his convictions intact, and the very particular thing about that, the thing that Astoria kept coming back to, was that nobody had told him to do it. Nobody had organized him or directed him or been there to authorize the decision. He'd looked at the situation, looked at what was right, and walked toward it. She'd grown up around powerful men. Her father was powerful. The men in that ministry ballroom were powerful. Most of them, when faced with a choice between right and safe, had developed extremely sophisticated reasoning for why safe was actually more right when you examined it carefully enough. Harry had apparently not learned this particular sophistication. She wasn't sure if that was admirable or terrifying. She decided, after consideration, that it was both, and that this was probably fine. The summer letters were longer than usual. He told her about the Dursleys with a matter-of-fact candor that made her furious on his behalf, and she told him she was furious and he told her it was fine, and she told him fine was insufficient, and he told her she was starting to sound like Molly Weasley, and she told him she'd never met Molly Weasley but if Molly Weasley agreed with her then Molly Weasley was clearly sensible, and he wrote back a letter that was mostly laughter in punctuation form. She told him about her summer, the estate, the books, the long afternoons in the library, her father's careful social calendar. She did not tell him about the flare-up in late July, the week she'd spent in bed with the blood curse doing what it periodically did, the healer who came quietly and went quietly and left her mother with a face that she smoothed into serenity before she came to sit with Astoria. She didn't tell him because it wasn't the right time and also because she wasn't ready to, and she'd decided she would not do things before she was ready. She was 10. She had time. She told Daphne, when her sister came home for August, that she was looking forward to Hogwarts. Second year is better than first, Daphne said. You know where everything is. People know where to place you. It's more interesting. Has anyone placed you yet? Daphne's expression was serene in a way that meant she'd placed herself exactly where she wanted to be and wasn't interested in discussing it. Adequately. And Harry? Daphne asked, with the studied casualness she employed when she actually wanted to know something. We write, Astoria said. I know you write. I've seen the owl traffic. I'm asking something different. Astoria looked out the window at the summer grounds. He's interesting, she said. He's the most genuinely himself person I've ever corresponded with. Most people perform something in letters, more elegance or more wit or more emotion than they actually have. He performs nothing. What he writes is what he is. That's not nothing, Daphne said. No, Astoria agreed. It's not nothing. She started at Hogwarts in September 1992. The Sorting Hat spent exactly 9 seconds on her head, she felt it, the brief internal conversation that wasn't quite words, more like recognition, and said Slytherin in a tone that suggested it wasn't remotely surprised. She walked to the Slytherin table and sat beside Daphne and felt the castle settle around her like something that had been waiting for her to arrive. Across the hall, at the Gryffindor table, Harry was watching the sorting. She caught his eye accidentally, or possibly not entirely accidentally, the compass sense having been particularly directional since she'd stepped through the barrier at King's Cross, and he gave a small nod. She returned it. You're here, said the nod. I'm here, said hers. It was not the most eloquent exchange. But it established something. Hogwarts in Astoria's first year was also Harry's second, which meant she arrived just in time for whatever chaos was apparently his natural environment. The Chamber of Secrets opened. Students were petrified. The school ran on a current of low-level fear that Astoria found both unpleasant and analytically interesting. She was in no danger, the basilisk, she determined from the library and a series of careful observations, was targeting Muggle-born students, and she was pureblood, but the injustice of that particular protection was not lost on her. She tracked it through letters. Harry was tracking it too, from a different angle, with Ron and Hermione, with the barely concealed urgency of someone who found people he cared about in danger and found the institutional response to that danger inadequate. Hermione Granger was petrified in November, and it made Harry quiet in a way that his letters captured perfectly, not the performed grief of someone saying the right things, but the actual thing, the flat and simple horror of someone who has taken care, all his life, not to form too many attachments, and now one of the things he'd let himself need had been hurt. Astoria wrote back, "She's in the hospital wing. Pomfrey is good. Hermione is too stubborn to be petrified indefinitely, she'll have been researching solutions in her head the entire time. When she wakes up, she'll have answers. Wait for her." 3 days later, she had a page. She'd torn it out of a library book before she was attacked. She knew what it was. How did you know she'd have answers? Because she's Hermione Granger. Knowing things when everyone else doesn't is the thing she does. Did you really think she was going to be petrified without leaving notes? His reply was a single line, "Should have thought of that sooner." She almost wrote, "You were scared." She didn't, because he knew that, and saying it was redundant. Instead, "You thought of it when you needed to." That's enough. They navigated that year in parallel, she through her own first-year challenges, he through the chamber. She was good at Hogwarts in the way she was good at most things that required systematic thinking applied to a complex and partly irrational system. She mastered her coursework ahead of schedule, developed a small network of contacts across houses that most first-years didn't attempt, and established, by Christmas, a reputation among the Slytherin upper years as someone whose opinion on complex problems was worth having. She was 11. The teachers did not quite know what to make of her. Snape, who had clear favorites in Slytherin and clear antipathies in Gryffindor, gave Astoria a look in her second week of potions that she couldn't fully decode, not warm, because Snape's warmth was almost entirely theoretical, but something adjacent to respect, or perhaps recognition. He never gave her anything lower than an outstanding on marked work, and he never praised her in class, and she decided she preferred that to the performative encouragement some teachers deployed. McGonagall was different. McGonagall saw her the way McGonagall saw everyone who was genuinely capable, with a precision that was its own form of approval. She said, at the end of Astoria's first Transfiguration exam, "You've been ahead of the first-year material since week 2, Miss Greengrass. I'll speak to your head of house about supplementary work." And that was that. Flitwick was delighted by her on general principle. She liked Flitwick. February brought a library encounter that she hadn't planned. She was returning a stack of books to the restricted section. Madame Pants had given her provisional restricted access after the third time she'd found Astoria sitting outside the gate reading a restricted text through the bars with a borrowed extendable charm she'd assembled from component parts, when she ran into Harry coming the other direction. Not literally this time. He looked tired in the particular way he looked tired when something was wrong that he wasn't saying. She'd learned to read the Harry letters tired versus the Harry actually tired, and this was the latter variety. "You're in the restricted section," she said. "So are you." He nodded at her stack. "I have conditional access." "Do you?" "Not technically." She raised an eyebrow. "I know where I'm not technically supposed to be," he said, which was not a defense so much as an acknowledgement. "I'm looking for something specific." "The basilisk." He stared at her. "You've been looking at this for months," she said. "It's not a ghost. Ghosts don't petrify, they go insubstantial when surprised. It's not petrifying people directly, because the range is wrong for most creatures. Something people are seeing indirectly, something that can move through the plumbing. I've been thinking basilisk for 3 weeks. You've been on this longer than me. Am I wrong?" A pause. Something in his expression loosened, not relief, exactly, but something like the unclenching of a thing he'd been holding too tightly. "No. You're not wrong. Tell me what you know, Astoria said. They stood in the restricted section for 40 minutes. She told him what she'd found from the plumbing angle. The acoustics of the attack suggested something below the castle, moving through pre-existing infrastructure. He told her about Moaning Myrtle and the flooding, which she hadn't known. She told him that Salazar Slytherin, according to a biography in the family library that she'd read in August, had been specifically fascinated by serpent magic, not just Parseltongue, but architectural serpent symbolism, hidden passages keyed to snake-related magic. The entrance to the chamber, she said, will be in a place that has serpent imagery and a water connection. Myrtle's bathroom makes sense. Myrtle's bathroom, Harry said quietly, and she watched him fit the piece into the larger picture with the fluency of someone who'd been working on it for a long time and had just found the last edge. Go, she said. Carefully. He looked at her, one of those direct looks that he gave to things that mattered. Thank you. You'd have gotten there, she said. I might have saved you 2 days. 2 days is something. It is, she agreed. He went. She returned her books and went back to her table and sat with her charms work and felt the compass needle pointing toward the dungeons, then further down, then further, and held herself deliberately still and kept working, because the only alternative was doing something unhelpful, and she was never unhelpful on purpose. He came back. He was fine. He was more than fine. He'd been in the chamber, he'd killed a 1,000-year-old basilisk with a sword he'd pulled from a hat, and he'd faced something that had the face of Tom Riddle and walked out alive. She read his letter about it and felt something she didn't have precise language for, something warm and hard and complicated, and she wrote back, "You pulled a sword out of a hat." Yes. A 1,000-year-old sword. The Sorting Hat, yes. Because you asked for help. Yes. And then you used it. Yes. She looked at the ceiling of the Slytherin dormitory for a long moment. Aldrich Greengrass wrote that the compact recognizes 2 magics that rhyme. I've been thinking about what that means. Magic has character, it has specific shape, specific resonance. Yours does something I've seen in the library research on Gryffindor's blade. It responds to genuine need, genuine choice. It doesn't perform. It just is. Mine does something different. It accumulates, systematizes, connects. Different shape. But they're compatible. That's what the compact recognized. Different shapes that fit together. I'm telling you this because I think you should know, not because the compact requires it. His reply took 4 days, which was longer than usual. I've been thinking about what to say back to that since I got it. I think you're right about the magic. About what it does. And I think you telling me because you chose to, not because you had to, that matters more than the thing you told me. Astoria folded the letter. She put it with the others, in the box under her bed that she kept locked with a charm she'd designed herself. Outside the dormitory window, the Scottish spring was beginning its grudging arrival, grey giving way to pale green on the hills, the loch still and silver in the early morning light. She was 11 years old. She had 5 more years of Hogwarts in front of her. She had a blood curse she refused to let be the most interesting thing about her, and a compact she'd stopped resenting and hadn't quite decided to embrace, and a correspondence with Harry Potter that had become, she recognized with her usual precision, one of the things she would defend if anyone tried to take it from her. Not because magic told her to. Because she'd decided. 3rd year came and went. Harry's 3rd year was Dementors and a mass murderer who wasn't and a time-turner and the kind of year that would have broken most people and seemed to have made him, if anything, more certain of himself. Astoria tracked it through letters and through the things Daphne reported from the corridors and through her own observations in the few shared spaces Hogwarts offered different house years. She watched him, when she had the opportunity, with the analytical attention she gave to things she found important. She watched him in the Great Hall at Quidditch victories, the way he didn't perform triumph, just felt it, quiet and genuine. She watched him in the library when he was working something out, the very specific quality of his stillness when he was thinking hard. She watched him in the one defense against the dark arts class they shared. Second years had been combined with a third-year group for one double session due to a scheduling conflict, and watched him demonstrate a Patronus. A Patronus. 14 years old, casting a fully corporeal Patronus in a classroom setting. She'd looked that up. Fully corporeal patron uses in classroom demonstrations were extraordinarily rare. Auror sometimes couldn't manage it. He'd done it because Lupin had asked him to show the class, and he'd done it with the particular matter-of-fact competence he applied to everything that was actually important to him. No performance, no flourish, just the silver stag bounding across the classroom like something from a world where everything was exactly what it said it was. She'd written to him that night, "I saw the Patronus today." Oh. Right. Lupin mentioned the class combination. "You didn't tell me you could cast a corporeal one. You didn't ask." She stared at the letter. "Harry. Most qualified adult wizards can't cast a corporeal Patronus." "I know. And you've been doing it since third year." "Second year, actually. The first time. I didn't get it corporeal until third." She put the letter down. She picked it up again. "Why didn't you tell me?" "It didn't come up. It's not the most interesting thing about me." She wrote back, "What is the most interesting thing about you?" His reply was almost immediate, which meant he'd been waiting to see what she'd say. "I'm not sure yet. I'll let you know when I figure it out." She smiled. She didn't hide it. There was no one in the dormitory to see, and even if there had been, she'd decided some time ago that hiding things she actually felt was a waste of energy she didn't have unlimited quantities of. In fourth year, they would be at Hogwarts together for the first time as genuine peers in terms of academic year proximity. She'd be third year. He'd be fourth. The compact's magic, which she'd felt shifting incrementally each year since the gala, had been doing something new since summer, less like a compass pointing at something and more like a frequency she could almost but not quite hear. She mentioned this to Daphne on the train back to Hogwarts in September. Daphne listened with the focused attention she gave to things that actually mattered, which meant Daphne thought this mattered. "The completion phase starts at 17, Daphne said. But the escalation starts earlier. Most compact literature suggests third or fourth year is when the resonance becomes more active." "I know. I've read the literature." "I know you've read the literature." Daphne looked at her. "How do you feel about it? About the magic escalating?" "About all of it." Astoria looked out the window at the countryside moving past, the end of summer gold on the fields. "I feel like something is starting," she said. "Something that was waiting." "And Harry?" "Harry feels it too. He doesn't say so directly. But I can tell." "You can tell because of the compact?" "I can tell," Astoria said, "because I know him. The compact is separate." Daphne nodded, with the particular quality of a nod that means, "I hear more than you're saying and I'm choosing to leave it there." The train moved through the autumn landscape and the castle waited at the other end, and the compass needle in Astoria's chest pointed, as it always did, straight and true at something she hadn't decided on yet but was beginning, carefully, to think she might. Chapter 3, The Compact's Teeth. The Triwizard Tournament arrived at Hogwarts the way most large problems arrived, announced in advance, thoroughly discussed, and still somehow more complicated than anyone had prepared for. Astoria heard about it in the first week of September from Daphne, who'd heard it from a sixth year who'd been in Dumbledore's office for a prefect meeting and caught the tail end of a conversation. By the time the official announcement came at the start of term feast, she'd already read everything available on the tournament's history, noted the mortality statistics, and formed 3 separate opinions about the Ministry's judgment in reviving it. She shared none of this at the feast. She ate her dinner and listened to the excited speculation around her and thought about Harry. The age restriction was 17. He was 14. She told herself this meant he wouldn't be in it, which was the logical position, and then she thought about the boy who'd walked into the Chamber of Secrets at 12 with a sword and no plan and come out alive, and she thought about the boy who'd faced a Dementor at 13 and conjured a stag, and she thought about the fundamental truth she'd assembled from 4 years of correspondence and observation. Harry Potter did not experience danger the way other people experienced danger. Other people felt danger and became smaller. Harry felt it and became more precisely himself. This was, she'd decided, either a gift or a problem, and frequently both simultaneously. The Beauxbatons and Durmstrang contingents arrived in October with the theatre that international delegations always brought, and the castle accommodated them with the particular grace of an institution that had seen everything and found nothing surprising. The goblet of fire was installed in the entrance hall with the kind of ceremony that was mostly for the students, because the professors' faces said this is a formality while their eyes said please nobody do anything stupid. She watched from the Slytherin group as the older students filed past the age line. She watched Cedric Diggory submit his name with the easy confidence of a 7th year who'd earned his shot. She watched Fred and George Weasley attempt something involving an aging potion, which she'd already predicted wouldn't work because the age line was a McGonagall production and McGonagall didn't make the kind of errors that clever 17-year-olds could exploit. She did not watch Harry specifically, because watching Harry specifically in public was something she was careful about. But she was aware of where he was, the way you're aware of a sound you're not listening to directly. The night the champions were announced, she was in the Slytherin common room finishing a runes essay when she felt it. It wasn't like the previous escalations of the compact, those had been gradual, incremental, the frequency building over months. This was sudden and sharp, a spike in whatever internal signal the compact produced, and it hit her hard enough that she dropped her quill. She sat very still for a moment. Around her, the common room's ambient noise continued. Nobody noticed. She picked up her quill. She waited. She felt the compass needle, which had been pointing in Harry's general direction the way it always did, do something she'd never felt it do before. It pulled. Like something had grabbed the other end of the thread and yanked. She was on her feet before she'd made a conscious decision. Greengrass. Draco Malfoy, from his armchair near the fire, watching her with the watchful lazy quality he deployed when he was pretending not to be paying attention. "Where are you going?" "Library," she said, which was almost never a lie, because she was almost always going to the library. She went to the corridor and stood in the cold stone quiet and felt the pull orienting itself. Not the library. Up. The entrance hall. She went up. The entrance hall was emptying out, students streaming back toward their dormitories after the champion announcement, talking over each other with the breathless energy of a genuinely surprising event. She pushed against the flow, scanning faces, tracking the pull. She found Daphne first, coming down from the great hall with her face showing precisely nothing, which meant she was showing precisely something. "Tell me," Astoria said. Harry's name came out of the goblet, Daphne said, quiet and fast. "After the 3 champions. 4th name. Triwizard Tournament apparently now has 4 champions." Astoria stood very still. "The hall," Daphne paused. "The Gryffindors think he cheated to get in. Most of the school thinks he cheated to get in. He's 14. "He's 14, Astoria agreed, which means he didn't put his name in." "I know that." Dumbledore's face when the name came out. "What was his face?" Daphne knew why she was asking. Dumbledore's reactions were data points, and she'd been reading him since she was 9. "Alarmed," Daphne said, which was significant. Dumbledore being visibly alarmed meant the situation was worse than a schoolboy prank. Then controlled. Very fast. But alarmed first. Astoria turned and went toward the corridor that led to the Gryffindor Tower. "You can't go up to Gryffindor Tower," Daphne said, following her. "I'm not going to the tower." "Then where?" She stopped at the base of the marble staircase. The pull was less directional now, which meant the source was moving. He was somewhere in the castle, probably between the Great Hall and the tower. She stood and waited with the patience she applied to everything that required patience. He came around the corner of the third-floor landing with Ron Weasley beside him and several Gryffindors trailing, and he was in the middle of what looked like an argument that he wasn't raising his voice for, which was its own kind of telling. Ron's voice was the one carrying, tight and unhappy, the sound of someone who has decided to believe the wrong thing and is defending it loudly because loudness sometimes substitutes for certainty. Harry saw her before he reached the bottom. She watched his face adjust, not surprise, more like relief locating itself, the way you find something you needed. Ron stopped talking. Astoria looked at Harry. He looked back. "Are you hurt?" she said. "No." He glanced at the group around him. "Can we, common room," Daphne said smoothly. "Ours. Fifth years aren't back yet, you'll have 20 minutes. Astoria turned to lead the way and didn't look back to see if he was following. She knew he was. The Slytherin common room at 9:30 on a Thursday was mostly empty, a handful of upper years, none of whom looked at Harry with anything more alarmed than mild interest, because Astoria's presence beside him sent a signal that the Slytherin social system processed efficiently. She led him to the table by the far window where she always worked and sat down across from him and looked at him properly for the first time tonight. He looked, she decided, like someone who had just been handed something very heavy and was still deciding how to hold it. "Tell me everything," she said. From before the name came out. He told her. He did it in the economical way he had, no performance, no dramatization, just facts in order with the relevant emotional texture acknowledged and then set aside. She listened without interrupting, which was something she was not always good at but did when it mattered. He told her about the cup, about the name, about the professors' faces and Dumbledore's questions and Mad-Eye Moody's eyes. He told her about the walk back up from the room where they'd taken him, and about Ron. He said Ron's name the way you say a thing that's hurting you that you haven't decided what to do about yet. Daphne was at the other end of the table with a book open, not reading it, present in the way she was present when something important was happening to her sister, proximate and careful and not in the way. "Someone put your name in," Astoria said. "Yes. Someone who could bypass a McGonagall age line. Which means serious magic. And someone who wanted you in the tournament. Which means someone who wants me in a situation where dying is on the table." He said it flat and factual, without the dramatic weight most people would have given it. "The tournament has a historical death rate. 30% across all recorded iterations," Astoria said. "Higher in the 14th century. He looked at her. "I looked it up in July when the announcement came. I wanted to know the actual numbers." She met his gaze. "You're going to be in it whether you want to be or not. The magical contract, the tournament contract, not ours, is binding once your name is drawn." "I know. So the question is how you're in it, not whether." Something in him settled, she could see it, the particular quality of his attention sharpening from reactive to strategic. This was the version of Harry she'd seen glimpses of in letters and twice in person, the one who felt the situation, processed the fear, and then put the fear somewhere useful and started working. "The first task," he said. "I need information." "I'll get you information," she said. "What kind and how fast?" "I don't know what the task is." "Neither does anyone." She thought for a moment. "What I can get you is historical task data, what the previous tournaments used, what the pattern of escalation was, what kinds of challenges appear in early, mid, and final tasks. It won't tell you the specific task but it narrows the probability field. That's something. I'll have it by Sunday." He looked at her for a moment. "Thank you." "Don't," she said. "We've been over this. You don't thank me for being useful. I thank you for choosing to be." She held his gaze. "Fair point," she said, which was the closest she usually came to conceding anything. Ron Weasley, it turned out, needed 2 weeks and a horntail before he came around. Astoria tracked this through her letters with Harry and through her own observations of the Gryffindor table. Ron's body language was legible from 30 feet, which was both endearing and somewhat alarming in terms of his future career options. She had no strong feelings about Ron personally. She'd assessed him as loyal, brave, occasionally jealous, and fundamentally decent, which was a workable combination of traits if the jealousy was manageable. The first task was dragons, which she heard about because Hermione, who had found out, told someone who told someone else in a chain that ended with a Slytherin fifth year who told Daphne who told Astoria. She added this to the probability analysis she'd given Harry and wrote immediately. Dragons. First task. Based on the historical precedent data, the task will involve getting past it to retrieve something. The something will be valuable, possibly gold-colored, possibly in the nest. Don't fight it, maneuvering will work where force won't. Your Patronus instinct is right for this, speed and space, not direct confrontation. His reply came the same evening. I was already thinking about the broom. Good. Can you come? To the first task? She looked at the letter for a moment. It's a school event. I'll be in the stands with everyone else. I'll be in the stands and I'll know where you are and you'll know that. That's not nothing. No, she wrote back. It's not nothing. The first task was the most frightening thing she had watched while sitting completely still since she was old enough to be frightened. She sat in the stands with Daphne and Millicent and felt the compact signal go absolutely sharp and electric the moment Harry entered the arena, and she sat with her hands folded in her lap and watched him call his broom with a summoning charm that the crowd, which had never known him properly, treated as a revelation but which she recognized as simply Harry applying the correct solution to the problem in front of him. He was magnificent on a broom. She'd known this intellectually from reports and letters and Quidditch match observations, but she watched him move through the arena, banking and accelerating with the instinctive three-dimensional intelligence that defined exceptional flyers, and felt the academic knowledge become something much more concrete and immediate. He wasn't performing. He was just in absolute perfect communion with what he was doing, the way people are when they're doing the thing they were made for. He got the golden egg. He walked out of the arena upright and intact. She exhaled. Daphne's hand was on her arm. She hadn't noticed it arriving, which meant it had been there for a while. He's fine, Daphne said. I know, Astoria said. Her voice came out steady because she'd been maintaining it that way for the last 40 minutes. Your hands. She looked down. Her knuckles were white. She unclenched her fingers deliberately and breathed. Don't tell me I'm fine, she said. I wasn't going to, Daphne said. The evening after the first task, the castle celebrated in its various house-specific ways. The Slytherin common room did not celebrate Harry Potter, but it was quieter than usual, which was its own kind of acknowledgement. Astoria went to the library and found him there. She hadn't arranged it, but she'd thought he might go there because he went there when he needed to process things, and she understood that about him. He was sitting at her table. He'd been careful to sit at her specific table, she noted, which meant he'd noticed which one was hers. She sat across from him. He had the golden egg in front of him, which was still making the periodic shrieking noise it made when opened. He'd clearly opened it, winced, and closed it. It screams, he said. I noticed. It's a clue, Dumbledore says. Everything's a clue. The question is what kind. She reached across and put her hand on the egg. The compact signal was so sharp tonight, elevated from the task, running high, that when her fingers touched something he'd been carrying all day it did something unexpected. Not painful. Not dramatic. Just, a warmth, spreading up her arm, a sense of recognition. She kept her face still and her hand in place. It screams in air, she said. If it's keyed to a different medium, water, Harry said. He was looking at her hand on the egg with an expression she'd never quite seen on him before. Mere people, she said. The lake. Second task. Something in the lake. He was quiet for a moment. Something someone will take from me. She looked up at him. Not me, she said. I'm not the obvious choice. They'll take the people in front of everyone, the ones that are publicly associated." She stopped. She thought about Ron and Hermione, and the way Harry's face went when either of them was in danger. "You'll find them," she said. "You always do." He was watching her with that quality she'd identified over years, not performing anything, just being there. "What you said," he said. "About not being the obvious choice." His voice was careful in the specific way it got careful when he was saying something he'd been thinking about. "For taking." "Yes. That's because no one knows," he said. "About the compact. About any of it. Most people don't. The ones who do are either trustworthy or too politically careful to broadcast it." "Is that why?" he asked. "Or is it because you don't want them to know?" She held his gaze. "Does it matter?" "It does to me." The library was very quiet. The candles were at their evening low. Somewhere in the stacks, a book shifted on a shelf. "I don't hide things I'm proud of," Astoria said, which was not quite a direct answer but was honest, and he recognized the distinction. "Astoria." "Harry. Are you proud of it?" he asked. "Us writing. The compact. Any of it." She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about what she'd told Daphne on the train in September. Something starting. Something waiting. "I'm proud of the letters," she said. "The compact is," she paused, "something I'm still deciding about. Not because of you. Because of what it means that magic chose for me. I need to get to the point where I know I'd choose it too." He nodded. She'd expected him to push or to retreat. Most people did one or the other when they got close to something real. Instead he just nodded, with the thoughtful steady quality that she'd stopped being surprised by and started simply valuing. "That's fair," he said. "Is it enough?" she asked, because she was honest even when it cost her. "Yes," he said, without hesitating. November moved into December with the particular rhythm of a Hogwarts term under pressure, coursework, the Yule Ball announcement, the constant low-grade tension of the tournament. The Yule Ball sent the fourth years into a social storm that Astoria watched from the detached vantage of a third year who was not required to have a date and found the whole process analytically interesting. Harry asked her 3 days after the announcement. He did it in a letter, which was both very Harry and very them, direct, no performance, clear. "The Yule Ball. Would you go with me?" Not the compact asking. "I'm asking." She held the letter for a moment. "Yes," she wrote back. "Though I should tell you I intend to beat your dress robes in terms of quality. That's an extremely low bar, Astoria. My dress robes are maroon." "I know. Hermione told me. We'll fix that." The fixing of Harry's dress robes involved a trip to Hogsmeade and Daphne's rather formidable taste, and ended with him in deep midnight blue that made his eyes do the thing they did when the light was right. Astoria wore dark grey that was almost silver, because she had decided not to wear Slytherin colors to an event where she was going as Harry Potter's date and drawing enough attention without the color commentary. They arrived at the ball together and the effect on the assembled student body was, she acknowledged privately, fairly significant. She'd expected it. She'd prepared for it. She'd prepared for the whispers and the stares and the particular quality of attention that came from walking into a room beside someone who was simultaneously the most famous person in it and the most reluctant to be famous. She'd prepared for the Slytherin corner, where Draco Malfoy's face was doing something complicated, and the Gryffindor contingent surprise, and Rita Skeeter's visible professional interest from the press table. She hadn't entirely prepared for Harry's hand finding hers at the entrance and the warmth of it, compact and ordinary and completely real. They danced. He was not, he'd told her, a good dancer. He was right about this, but he was honest about it and paid attention to what she did and adjusted, which meant by the second dance he was substantially better, because Harry Potter applied himself to things that mattered and clearly this mattered. She found this, in some way she hadn't predicted, quite endearing. Malfoy has been staring at us for 11 minutes, she said during the third dance. I know. He started at the entrance. Does it bother you? Not particularly. He turned her through a step with more competence than she'd expected. Does it bother you? No. But you should know that being seen with me publicly changes certain things in terms of how people read the political situation. I don't care about the political situation. I know you don't. I do. I'm telling you what it means so you're informed, not so you can factor it into your decisions. She met his eyes, which were very close at this distance, dance distance. Make your decisions however you want. I'll manage the rest. He looked at her with that expression, the one she'd started being careful about, because it did something to her concentration. You don't have to manage anything. I want to, she said. Managing things is what I do. So's being stubborn. I prefer consistent. He actually laughed at that, a real one, not the small almost smile but the genuine article, brief and warm. She felt the compact signal spike. She felt also, immediately and distinctly, something else, a sensation she'd felt before, in the library, on bad days when the blood curse flared. A cold thread running through the warmth, a reminder. She kept dancing. She kept her face where it was. She didn't let it show. But Harry noticed anyway. You all right? He said, quiet. Fine. That's the word you use when you're not fine but have decided not to discuss it. She looked up at him. You've been paying attention. You think I haven't been? The thread of cold faded. She breathed. I'm fine, she said, and this time it was true enough. Dance. He danced. Theodore Nott was at the ball not as a champion but as a Hogwarts student with a date he was barely speaking to. He was 15, already with his father's blade-thin face and his father's quality of careful, unshowy attention. He watched Harry Potter dancing with Astoria Greengrass and felt the information slot into the framework his father had been building over 3 years. He'd received a letter from his father the previous month. His father had been specific: note the relationship, note the development, note anything that suggested the compact was progressing toward its completion. It will need to be addressed, his father had written, before the situation with the Dark Lord resolves. The compact gives the Greengrass family a structural protection from both sides. That protection cannot be permitted to consolidate. Theo watched them dance. He thought his father was probably right about the problem. He wasn't entirely sure his father was right about the solution, but he hadn't said so, because you didn't say so to his father. He looked away. January brought the return of term and the approach of the second task. Astoria's historical analysis had been right about the Mare people, and Harry had confirmed it through a night in the prefect's bathroom with the golden egg in a marauder's map that he'd mentioned in letters but never fully explained. She'd asked, he'd told her, and she'd spent 20 minutes being impressed by a piece of enchantment work she'd previously have said was theoretically impossible. Your father made this, she said. My father and Sirius and Remus Lupin and Peter Pettigrew. Pettigrew. She'd filed that. The 4 of them, while at school. Apparently. Harry. That's, she considered. That map represents 12 to 15 years of theoretical development reduced to student application. That's extraordinary. They were extraordinary people. He said it with a quietness that had weight in it. 2 of them are dead and 1 of them, he stopped. It's complicated. I know. She did know, she'd read everything published about the Marauders over the years, because she read everything, and she'd assembled a picture of them that was probably more complete than most. The map is a legacy. You should know what it actually is. What do you mean? It's not just a map. It's 4 minds combined into a single magical object. The commentary, the insults when Snape tries to read it, that's not just charm work, that's them. Preserved in magic. You're carrying your father around, every time you use it. He was quiet for a moment. I hadn't thought of it like that. You should, she said, not unkindly. It matters. The second task came in February and was worse than the first in a specific way, not more physically dangerous, but more emotionally direct. They were taking something you'd miss. She'd known this since the egg decoding, but the knowing didn't prevent the 3 hours of standing at the lake's edge in the February cold, watching the surface, compass needle pointing straight down. He was down there with gillyweed he'd gotten from Neville Longbottom. She'd tracked that through Hermione, who'd been nervous about the gillyweed angle, and she stood in the stands and watched the bubbles and the judges and the other champions surface and waited. He came up last. He came up with 3 people, Ron, a small girl who Astoria identified as Fleur Delacour's younger sister, and Victor Crumb's hostage, Hermione. Third task first to bring up the hostages was the rule, last to surface but with 3 instead of 1. She watched them award him second-place points and she watched him shrug about the points the way he shrugged about most official assessments of his performance, with a mild indifference that suggested he'd measured himself against a different metric and found the official one irrelevant. She met him at the edge of the lake while the celebrations were still happening. He was wrapped in a towel, lake water dripping, hair worse than usual. She stood in front of him and looked at him. Gabrielle Delacour, she said. She was still down there. After the hour. I couldn't just, I know. She looked at him. I know you couldn't. I lost points. I know that too. She looked at the lake, then back at him. Harry. I need to tell you something and I need you to let me say the whole thing before you respond. He met her gaze. Okay. I've known for a while that you're going to be in danger that's bigger than this tournament. Not because of a prophecy, though I suspect there is one, but because Voldemort's return, which Dumbledore is clearly anticipating, will put you at the center of it because you've been at the center of everything connected to him since you were 1 year old. That's not changing. He was very still. I'm not afraid of that, she said. I want you to know that directly. I'm not afraid of what you're walking toward, and I'm not going to pretend the compact is what makes me say that. Astoria, let me finish. She breathed. I have a blood curse. You know that, you've known it since you put together the references in my letters. I can see when you figured something out from the way your writing changes. I'm not going to manage my life around it. But it means I know what it's like to have something significant and non-negotiable that you didn't choose. And I've decided that between your non-negotiable and mine, I'd rather be standing next to them together than safely away from both. He looked at her for a long moment. Is this you deciding? He asked. About the compact. This is me deciding, she said. About us. The compact can manage itself. Something crossed his face, that full expression, the one she was careful about, warm and certain and entirely unperformed. He stepped forward slightly. The lake was dripping from his hair. He was cold and she could see it and she could see that he didn't care, because he was looking at her with the particular quality of full attention that Harry Potter gave to things that mattered most. Can I? He started. Yes, she said. He kissed her. Or she kissed him, because they moved at the same time, and it was brief and cold from the lake water and warm underneath that, and absolutely nothing like the accidental press of lips at a Ministry Gala when they were both 9 years old, and everything like something she'd decided. When they separated, seconds, 10 seconds, she hadn't counted, she always counted, the compact signal was doing something entirely new. Not a compass needle. Not a frequency half heard. Something warm and settled and mutual, like a song being sung from both sides at once. Right, Harry said. Right, she agreed. They stood at the edge of the lake in the February cold and the world went about its business around them, and neither of them thought about Theodore Knott Sr. watching the Daily Prophet's photographer's plate in his study 300 miles away, noting with his precise and careful attention that the photograph showed Harry Potter and Astoria Greengrass at the lakeside, proximate and unmistakable. His letter to his contact arrived the following day. The compact is progressing. Acceleration is confirmed. Move to the next stage of preparation. We have time before majority, but not as much as before. The third task was a maze. By the time June arrived, Astoria had assembled from various sources, Hermione, Daphne's network, her own observations, a picture of what the maze contained that was incomplete but directionally useful. She gave Harry everything she had. He took it with his characteristic economy of acknowledgement, not minimizing the gift, just not making it ceremonial, because that was how he took important things. She was in the stands when the champions went in. She was in the stands when the maze began to close and the hedges moved and the maze did what mazes did, which was show you things you weren't prepared for. She was in the stands at midnight when the tournament cup activated and Harry disappeared. The stands went confused, then quiet, then a different kind of quiet. She felt the compass needle spin. It didn't stop spinning. It kept moving, frantic and wrong, pointing somewhere it couldn't resolve. Not gone, she knew the difference, she'd thought about it, but elsewhere, somewhere the compact signal couldn't accurately locate because the magic was different there. She stood up. Daphne's hand was on her arm instantly. Astoria. Something's wrong, she said. It came out flat. Something's very wrong. I know. Daphne's voice was steady in the way it got steady when she was being strong on purpose. There's nothing you can do from the stands. I know that. Then sit down. She sat down. She held herself still with the considerable force of will she developed over years of holding herself still through things that wanted her not to be. The stands buzzed and moved and Dumbledore swept down toward the pitch and Fleur Delacour was crying and Victor Crumb was being attended to and somewhere the compass needle kept spinning and spinning. When Harry came back, when the cup activated in reverse and deposited him and Cedric Diggory's body on the pitch grass, she felt the needle find north again like a physical impact, and the breath that came out of her had been waiting in her chest for what felt like hours. He was there. He was hurt and he was there. She did not run onto the pitch. She watched the adults manage it with the controlled anguish of someone who had decided she was not a person who ran onto pitches. She watched Dumbledore reach him first, and Moody, and then something in Moody's posture, something in the angle of his approach and the way his magical eye moved, registered against Astoria's 4 years of careful observation and landed wrong. She was already moving to find Dumbledore's deputy before the thought fully formed. She was 13 years old and she caught Professor Sprout's sleeve in the chaotic movement of the pitch and said, with a clarity that cut through the noise, "Moody's wrong. Something is wrong with Moody. Dumbledore needs to know before he goes anywhere alone with him." Sprout looked at her for 1 second. Then she turned and moved with the urgency of an adult who had been given specific information by someone with a specific face. Astoria turned back to the pitch. She found Harry's face in the chaos, he was being half-carried toward the castle, Dumbledore beside him. He looked up, across the distance, and found her with the unerring accuracy of the compass pointing true. She held his gaze. "I'm here," said hers. And she felt his, "I know. I know you are." Later, much later, after Moody had been found to be Bartemius Crouch Jr. and Voldemort had returned and the summer was coming and everything had changed its weight and color, Harry's letter arrived in the post and was longer than usual and written in the middle of the night, she could tell by the quality of the handwriting. He told her everything. About the graveyard. About the wand connection. About Cedric. About what Voldemort looked like and what he'd said and what it felt like to stand there with borrowed time running out and decide to go down fighting rather than not go down at all. She read the letter sitting on the floor of her bedroom at 3 in the morning with her back against the bed, the same way she'd read every important letter from him, and when she finished she sat with it for a long time. Then she wrote back. "Harry. I'm going to say the obvious thing because you need to hear it said plainly. You went into a graveyard at 14, outnumbered, without backup, against the most feared dark wizard in a century, and you came back. That is not a small thing. Don't let anyone make it small, especially not you. Cedric's death is not yours to carry alone. You didn't put him in that maze. You know what's coming. I know what's coming. We talked about this at the lake, you're non-negotiable and mine. I meant it then and I mean it now. There are people trying to stop the compact. I've picked up traces of it through channels I'll tell you about when I see you. I'm not afraid of them either. Come back to school in September. I'll be here. His reply was shorter. But it was, she decided, everything. I know you will. Chapter 4, The Blood and the Name. The summer between 4th and 5th year was the summer the world stopped pretending. Voldemort was back. The Ministry knew it and denied it. Dumbledore knew it and said it. The Daily Prophet chose a side and the side it chose was the comfortable one, and Astoria read every edition with the meticulous attention she gave to primary sources, not because she trusted them but because the shape of a lie told you as much as the truth it was covering. She built a picture from the gaps, what wasn't reported, what was buried in small print, what names appeared in ministry notices for reassignment or early retirement. The picture it built was not encouraging. She was in the family library in July when her father came in and closed the door, which he didn't do unless the conversation was one he wanted contained. Cyrus Greengrass at 50 had the same silver-templed authority he'd always had, but summer had put something new in the lines around his eyes, a tightness that she recognized as controlled worry. He sat in the chair across from her reading table and folded his hands and looked at his youngest daughter with the expression of a man who had prepared what he wanted to say and was already aware it wasn't going to land the way he'd planned. I need to discuss the compact, he said. All right, she said. There are people, he paused, rearranging his phrasing. The political situation has changed substantially. Voldemort's return, if confirmed, it's confirmed, she said. If publicly confirmed, he said, which was a distinction he was making carefully, will require every family in our position to make decisions about allegiance. The compact creates a structural problem. It places us in an association with Harry Potter that what? She said. That limits our options. He said it quietly, without anger. You're 13, Astoria. This wasn't meant to be your problem at 13. It became my problem at 9, she said. I've had 4 years with it. I'm reasonably current on the relevant considerations. Cyrus looked at her for a moment with the expression he got sometimes, the one that said he was seeing something in her that surprised him and that he wasn't sure whether to be proud of or unsettled by. I've spoken with Aldrin Fawcett. He's the foremost authority on compact dissolution in Britain. The room was very quiet. What did he say? She asked. The procedure exists. It requires the voluntary magical consent of both parties, administered at a recognized magical authority, Gringotts or the Ministry. Both parties must be present and the consent must be demonstrably uncoerced. He paused. It would need to be Harry's choice as well as yours. And if one party doesn't consent? Then it can't be dissolved through legitimate means. He held her gaze. Astoria. I'm not ordering you to do this. I want you to understand that. But I'm asking you to consider it. The compact will be a target. You will be a target because of it. In the current climate, she said, standing next to Harry Potter is the most defensible position available to anyone who doesn't want to end up on the wrong side of what's coming. Cyrus was quiet. Voldemort loses, she said. I know you know that, you're too intelligent to actually believe the Ministry's position. He lost before. He'll lose again. And when he does, every family that kept themselves clean will be glad they kept themselves clean. The compact doesn't endanger us. It protects us. That's one reading. It's the correct reading. You're 13, he said again, but differently this time, not dismissive, more like a man observing something that unsettled his categories. I know the blood curse statistics better than the family healer, she said. I knew about it at 7. I started reading the grimoire at 9. I have read everything available in this library and the Hogwarts Library on compact law, political alliances in magical Britain from 1850 to present, and the documented pattern of Voldemort's first rise and fall. She looked at her father steadily. I am 13. I am also correct. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Cyrus looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the ceiling, in the particular way he did when he was revising his position and didn't want anyone to see the revision happening. I won't push the dissolution, he said finally. Not unilaterally. But I need you to be careful. I'm always careful. More careful. He stood. At the door, he paused. Your mother is right about you. What does mother say? That you were born knowing more than anyone told you. He left the door open, which meant the conversation was finished but not closed. Astoria sat with the open library around her and felt the summer pressing its particular weight against the windows. She wrote to Harry that evening. My father brought up dissolution. I told him no. He's not going to push it, not right now. But the pressure is there and I want you to know so you're not surprised if it surfaces from the Greengrass side. Also, there are people other than my father thinking about the compact as a problem. I've been building the picture for months. Someone's been making inquiries, solicitors, Gringotts records, compact law specialists. Not my father's inquiry, a different one. Older. More patient. I don't have a name yet. I will. His reply came in 2 days, which was slow for him. Astoria. The dissolution question. I should have said this sooner, I wouldn't consent to it. Not because of the compact's magic. Because I know what you've chosen and I'm not pretending otherwise. The other inquiry worries me more than your father. Your father I understand. Patient and separate means someone who's been thinking about this since before our fathers had their conversation. Tell me what you find. She found the name in August. It came through an unlikely chain, a Gringotts account manager who owed a favor to a curse-breaker who had worked with the Greengrass estate solicitors, whose junior associate had mentioned, in passing, an unusual consultation request from a party with specific interests in pre-modern compact law. The name attached to the request had been masked behind a representation firm, but the representation firm had a limited client roster, and Astoria had the time and the methodical patience to work through it. Theodore Knott Sr. She knew the name. She knew the name the way she knew all the names in the orbit of the Death Eater families, not personally, but comprehensively, from newspapers and genealogy records and her father's social calendar and the careful reading of silences at ministry events. Knott Sr. was old guard. Precise, intelligent, dangerous in the specific way that intellectual conviction combined with absolute loyalty was dangerous. She wrote to Harry. Theodore Knott Sr. Death Eater, first rise, apparently unrepentant and currently active. He's been investigating compact dissolution for 3 years. He has a son your year, Theodore Knott, Slytherin. I don't think he's working independently. I think this is operational, someone's directing it or it connects to a larger objective. His interest started the year after the compact activated, which means someone flagged it to him early. Someone who understood what the compact's political implications were. His dissolution inquiry has stalled at the consent requirement. He knows he can't force it through legitimate means. That means he's looking at illegitimate ones. Harry wrote back within hours. I'll tell Dumbledore. And Sirius. Be careful at Hogwarts. Knott's son, I've never been sure about him. I'll handle Knott's son, she wrote. You handle September. September arrived and with it Harry's 5th year and Astoria's 4th, and the school that met them was a different thing from the school they'd left in June. Umbridge arrived with her pink cardigan and her ministry directives and her smile that didn't reach anything above the cheekbones, and Astoria assessed her in the first week with the comprehensive efficiency she applied to new threats and categorized her as more dangerous than she looks, which was itself a warning category because she looked extremely dangerous. She watched Harry in the Great Hall at the start of term feast. He was sitting with Ron and Hermione and the Weasley twins and Neville and Luna Lovegood, and he had the controlled tense quality of someone managing a large volume of difficult things and not letting any of them show on his face. He'd written to her about the summer, the Dementor attack, the hearing, the ministry's position. She'd written back with analysis and he'd written back with something between gratitude and the particular frustration of someone who is right and being told they're not. She found him in the library on the fourth day. He was alone, which was unusual. Hermione was generally attached, Ron was generally nearby. He had a potions essay he wasn't writing and the particular distant look that meant he'd been sitting with something for a while. She sat across from him. Umbridge's defense curriculum, she said. She's pulled all practical work. I know, he said. The fifth years have their OWLs in June. No practical defense work for an entire year before OWL assessments. I know. She's not just limiting the curriculum, Astoria said. She's deliberately de-skilling the student population during the year that Voldemort returns. That's not oversight. That's instruction. Harry looked at her. I've been thinking the same thing for a week and couldn't get it to sit flat because it sounds paranoid, she said. I know. It also sounds correct. I want to teach them, he said. Practical defense. A group, anyone who wants to actually learn it. She looked at him steadily. Good. It'll violate Umbridge's educational decrees. Yes. She'll be watching for it. You'll need to be careful about where and when, Astoria said. Not here. The library's monitored since the new term rules. You need somewhere she doesn't know about. The room of requirement, he said. She'd read about it. She hadn't been sure it was real. Does it exist? Definitely. The corner of his mouth moved. I've used it. Then that works. She paused. I'd like to join. He looked up. You're a fourth-year Slytherin. Yes. Umbridge will what? Astoria said, with a mildness that had nothing mild in it. Report me for attending an unauthorized study group. I'll have my father's solicitors articulate the educational rights provisions in the Hogwarts founding charter before she finishes writing the notice. Harry stared at her for a moment, and then he did the thing he did, the genuine laugh, brief and warm. You actually have that ready. I've had it ready since September 3rd. She met his eyes. I'm coming. I know, he said. I didn't actually think I was going to talk you out of it. You weren't. He was quiet for a moment, watching her with that quality she'd stopped trying to be careful about. The compact signal had been elevated since the start of term, something she'd noticed was affected by proximity, by the frequency of genuine interaction versus letters, like the difference between a signal at distance and a signal in the same room. She'd told him this in a letter last spring and he'd replied, I noticed that too. I thought it was just being in the same place. It is, she'd written back. But it's also the compact. Both things can be true. Your father's position, Harry said. Has it changed? He's watching, she said. He hasn't moved. My father is a careful man, he's very good at not committing until the direction is clear. And not active. Patient. His son, she paused. Theo not watches me sometimes. Not hostile. I can't read it clearly. Be careful. I am always careful. I know. Be more careful. She looked at him. He said it with the directness of someone who isn't trying to control anything but has a specific feeling that he's choosing to say out loud. She found, as she often found with Harry, that honesty offered plainly was difficult to deflect. I will, she said. Dumbledore's army formed in October and became, over the autumn, the most efficiently secret organization Hogwarts had hosted since the Marauders. Astoria attended every session. She was the youngest by a year, the rest were fifth year and above, Harry's year or older, and she was aware of the assessment she got when she first appeared, the silent recalibration that happened when people realized she wasn't there by accident. She was also, by the third session, demonstrably one of the most capable students in the room. This wasn't performance. She didn't practice harder than the others or stay later or make a point of it. She simply had, by age 13, a foundational understanding of practical magic that went several years beyond her formal coursework because she'd been reading ahead since she could read and had spent 4 years corresponding with Harry about theory. The theory, it turned out, had compound interest when applied practically. Hermione noticed first, with the precise attention she gave to everyone's academic trajectory. She came to stand beside Astoria after a session where they'd been working on shielding charms and said, with characteristic directness, "Your shield work is at 7th year standard." "I know," Astoria said. "How?" "I read your notes from when you were practicing last year. I hope that's all right." Hermione blinked. "I didn't know you had my notes. Neville borrowed them and left them in the library and I read them before he came back. I returned them exactly. I should have told you." She paused. "I was going to. I kept forgetting because they were so interesting that I'd think about them and forget to address the provenance." Hermione stared at her for a moment. Then she said, "We should work together." "Yes," Astoria agreed. "I thought so when I first met you." They worked together. It produced results that Harry watched with the pleased expression of someone watching two forces of nature discover they were complementary rather than competitive. November was when it got complicated. Theodore Not, Theo, as he was known in Slytherin, which Astoria had always found a slightly incongruous casualness for someone with his particular quality of interior stillness, found her in the library on a Tuesday evening and sat down across from her without invitation. She looked up from her arithmancy text. "I need to tell you something," he said. She looked at him. He had his father's face, precise, controlled, but something different in the eyes. She'd been watching him since Harry's warning, which meant she'd been watching him carefully for 3 months, and what she'd found was more complicated than she'd expected. "Then tell me," she said. "My father has contracted a curse specialist." He said it flat and direct, the way people say things they've decided to say and are pushing through the discomfort of saying. "Not dissolution, he's moved past dissolution. The specialist works in what the old families call compact severance. It's not legal. It doesn't require consent." She held his gaze. "How long have you known?" "Since September. He wrote to me." A pause. "He wanted me to provide information about you and Potter." "I haven't." "Why not?" Theo looked at her with something complicated. "Because I don't think he's right. About what the compact means. About any of it." He said it the way someone says something they haven't told anyone, with the particular care of a word being said for the first time out loud. "Your father will notice you're not providing information," she said. "I know. That creates a problem for you." "I know that too." His expression didn't change. "I'm telling you because you need to know, not because I want anything from it." She studied him for a moment, that comprehensive assessment she gave to new variables. He was 15 and his father was a Death Eater and the world was reorganizing itself around a war and he'd come to sit across from her in the library and tell her the thing that most endangered him to tell. "The curse specialist," she said. "Do you have a name?" "Corvin Braith. He operates out of Eastern Europe, Bulgaria, primarily." She filed this. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." He stood. "My father is patient but he's not slow. If Potter's going to do something about this he needs to do it before the end of term." He left. She sat with the information for exactly 60 seconds, which was as long as she gave herself for feeling things before she started thinking about them. Then she put her arithmancy away and went to find Harry. He was in the room of requirement with Ron and Hermione, running a practice session with 6 fifth years on the impediment jinx. She stood in the doorway and caught his eye, and something in her face told him what she needed without words. He wrapped up the session in 5 minutes, efficient, no explanation, and came to her. She told him in the corridor, concise and fast. He listened the way he listened when it was urgent, completely still, processing continuously. "Braith," he said. "I know that name." "From where?" "Sirius." He was already thinking 3 steps ahead, she could see it. Sirius mentioned a Braith in the context of the Black family dark artifacts. He does severance work on magical bonds. It's not gentle." "It wouldn't be," she said. "The compact has been building toward its completion phase for 5 years. Severing it at this stage would require significant magical force." He looked at her. "Would it hurt you?" "Possibly." She said it factually. The curse literature suggests bond severance on an active compact causes magical trauma. Severity depends on the stage of development. His expression did the thing it did when someone he cared about was in danger, not loud, not theatrical, just a sharpening. A focusing. "We tell Dumbledore." "Yes." "Tonight." "And Sirius." "Yes." "And your father?" She paused. "My father doesn't know about Braith." "Then he needs to." Harry's voice was level. "Whatever his position on the compact, not hiring a dark art specialist to forcibly sever it is an attack on his daughter. He'll want to know." She thought about this. He was right, not about her father's feelings toward the compact specifically, but about his feelings toward anyone acting against his family without invitation. Cyrus Greengrass had carefully neutral politics, but he had a family pride that ran considerably deeper than politics. "You're right," she said. "First time for everything," he said, which was his particular humor, dry and self-aware and deployed when the situation was serious enough that the alternative to humor was something less manageable. She almost smiled. "Don't push it." They went to Dumbledore's office that night. Astoria told it in the compressed, factual way she'd rehearsed in her head walking up the moving staircases. Dumbledore listened with the absolute attention he gave to things that genuinely interested him, which was most things but this especially, and when she finished he was quiet for a moment with that quality of his, the sense of a very large mind processing a great deal of information simultaneously. "Corvin Braith," he said. "Yes. I know of him." He looked at Astoria over his half-moon glasses. "Miss Greengrass. Your source within the Knot family, I won't ask you to identify them, but I'd ask that you maintain that connection carefully." "I intend to," she said. "And you believe the information is genuine?" "I believe Theo Knot has decided his father is wrong about this," she said. "I believe that decision cost him something and he made it anyway." "Yes." Dumbledore nodded slowly, the way he nodded when he was storing something specific. "I will reach out to certain contacts regarding Braith's movements. In the meantime, I would advise that both of you take no unnecessary risks." "We never take unnecessary risks," Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him with something that was almost amusement. "Quite," he said. The owl to Cyrus Greengrass went from Dumbledore's office that night, the headmaster adding a note to Astoria's letter that she suspected carried more specific weight in pureblood legal terms than anything she could have written herself. Cyrus's reply arrived the next morning at breakfast, landing on the Slytherin table in front of Astoria with the haste of an owl that had been sent back almost immediately. It was 3 paragraphs. The first was her father confirming receipt. The second was her father confirming he was engaging his own legal and investigative resources regarding Knot. The third paragraph was shorter than the other 2. "You were right, in July, about everything. I am sorry it took me this long to say so clearly." She folded the letter. Daphne, sitting beside her, read the fold of it without reading the content. "Good news?" Daphne asked. "Adequate," Astoria said. "High praise from you. Don't push it." December came with Umbridge's educational decrees proliferating and the DA's membership growing and a general atmosphere of institutional tension that Astoria tracked through every available signal the way she tracked everything. The compact's escalation continued, it was fully in its active phase now, and the resonance between her and Harry was specific enough that she could tell, sometimes, the texture of his mood from the signal, which she found simultaneously useful and somewhat alarming. She mentioned this to him in the room of requirement one evening after a DA session, when the rest had gone and they were the last ones there, the enchanted room having produced, as it did sometimes, 2 chairs near a small fire that she was fairly sure reflected the room's assessment of what they actually needed. "I can feel your moods," she said. "Sometimes. Not always, not specifically, but directionally. Since October." He didn't look surprised. "I know. I've been able to since September." He paused. "I can tell when the curse flares." "Can I say that?" "Yes." She held his gaze. "I'd rather you say it. It's been twice since term started." "I can tell because the signal," he paused, choosing words carefully. "It goes quieter. Like you're putting something behind glass." "That's accurate." She breathed. "It's manageable. I have protocols." "I know you do." He looked at her with that full attention. "I'm not asking you to manage it differently. I just want you to know I know." She looked at the fire. This was the thing about Harry, the thing she'd assembled over 5 years of letters and 2 years of presents. He didn't want to fix the things that couldn't be fixed. He just wanted to be in the actual situation with you, rather than the improved version of the situation that was more comfortable for everyone involved. It was, she'd decided, the rarest quality she'd encountered in another person. "There's something I haven't told you," she said. "Okay. The curse progression rate. The healers have revised their estimate. I've known since August." She looked at him directly, because this was the kind of thing that required directness and she wasn't going to manage her way around it. "The initial model suggested my 50s. The current models are less specific but directionally earlier." The fire was quiet. His face was doing the thing she'd braced for, not the performance of grief, but the actual version, real and fast and then being put somewhere to be dealt with properly later. "How much earlier?" he asked. "The honest answer is they don't know. Curse progression of this kind isn't linear. It can plateau for years and then accelerate. The variables are," she stopped herself, because she was about to give him the statistical breakdown and this was not a moment for the statistical breakdown, and she was aware of the difference even if she sometimes chose precision over the right thing. "Unknown," she said. "But I'm not afraid of it. I've never been afraid of it. I'm telling you so you know, not so you can be afraid of it either." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Are you afraid of anything?" She thought about it genuinely. "Wasted time," she said. "That's it, really. Time that gets spent on things that don't matter." He looked at her. "Then don't waste it." "I don't intend to." "Good." He shifted, and his hand found hers where it rested on the arm of the chair, not urgent, not the grip of fear, just present. "Warm and still." "Neither do I." She looked down at their hands. She thought about Aldrich Greengrass in 1312 writing about 2 magics that rhyme, and she thought about whether she would choose this if the compact didn't exist, and she thought, yes. Obviously yes. Harry. Yeah. The knot situation. It's going to move before Christmas. He looked at her. Why? Because Braith operates seasonally, the dark art specialists in that tradition follow the old magical calendar, and there's a node point at winter solstice. If Not Senior is planning to use him, the next viable window is December 21st. That's 2 weeks away. Yes. He was quiet, thinking. She could feel it, the particular quality of the compact signal when he was working through something tactical, which was different from the everyday hum of it. Dumbledore needs to move on Braith before then, Harry said. He's already moving. But there's another element. She looked at him. Not Senior is going to try to get to you directly. The severance requires a physical component, he needs something connected to one of the parties. Hair, blood, something with strong personal magical imprint. Like what I've been carrying around for 5 years, Harry said. Exactly like that. He'd try to get to me through someone at the school. Through someone your age. She paused. His son. Harry was quiet for a moment. You said Theo told you his father wrote to him for information. Yes. And Theo didn't provide it. But Not Senior doesn't know that. She saw where he was going before he got there. You're thinking about using that. If Not Senior thinks his son is still cooperative, and we control what information Theo appears to be giving him, we can give him a specific window, she said. A controlled point of approach. And be ready when he arrives. She looked at him. Harry. You're talking about deliberately positioning yourself as bait. I'm talking about controlling the terms of an engagement instead of waiting to be engaged on someone else's terms. He met her gaze. It's a different thing. She held his gaze for a long moment. You're right, she said. It is different. Will you help me plan it? Obviously, she said. That's not even a question. They talked until the fire died down and the room of requirement gently adjusted its temperature to suggest it thought they should leave. She covered the operational planning, the what and when and how, and he covered the elements that were his specific domain, the things Dumbledore could be told, the people in the DA who could be positioned, the routes through the castle that Sirius would know from the Marauder's map. By the time they left, she had a plan that she was approximately 70% satisfied with, which for a plan assembled in one evening was reasonable. 70%, she told him at the door. What? My confidence level. In the plan. 70%. He considered this. What would get it to 80? Theo's confirmed cooperation. I can get that tomorrow. Then get it. She found Theo the next morning in the corridor before first class, in a brief window when the traffic was low. He looked at her when she approached with the controlled expression that meant he'd been expecting this. My father wrote again, he said, before she could speak. He's requested I arrange access. He wants something of Potter's. He said it with the flatness of someone who is disgusted by the thing they're saying. I didn't reply. We need you to reply, she said. He looked at her. Controlled information. A specific time and location. We'll be ready. She watched him processing it, the same kind of processing Harry did, running the implications forward. I know what I'm asking. You'd be actively working against your father. I've been doing that since September, he said. I just hadn't decided what to call it. She nodded. Can you do it? He was quiet for a moment, a young man standing at the edge of a decision that would mean something irrevocable. She recognized the quality of the silence. She'd stood in her own version of it. Yes, he said. Thank you. Don't thank me. He looked away briefly. Just, make it work. I will, she said. She meant it. Theo sent the letter. Not Senior replied. The window was set, December 20th, Hogsmeade, a specific location that Dumbledore's people could approach from 3 angles. Sirius communicated through the mirror Harry carried. December 20th was a Hogsmeade weekend by scheduling coincidence that Astoria had noted was likely not a coincidence at all, given that someone had clearly been planning this for months. She was in Hogsmeade with Daphne, who had been told the broad outline and had absorbed it with the composed efficiency she brought to everything, and was currently managing to appear to be shopping while maintaining a sight line on 2 separate streets. Harry was near the 3 broomsticks with Hermione, positioned to be visible. Astoria was 3 shops up, positioned to see the approach. The Dumbledore-adjacent people were invisible, which they were very good at being. Not Senior arrived at 11:30. She saw him come through the Hogsmeade entrance with the unhurried confidence of a man who believed he had the situation comprehensively managed. He was exactly as she'd built him from her intelligence, slim, precise, well-dressed, with a quality of focused intelligence in his bearing that was genuinely formidable. He walked toward the 3 broomsticks like someone with an appointment. He stopped. He stopped because he was looking at Harry through the window of the 3 broomsticks, and he was also, she saw, looking at her, standing 3 shops up, already turned toward him with her arms at her sides and her face entirely still. He understood then. She could see the moment of it, the recalibration happening in real time behind his eyes, the recognition that the arrangement he'd believed was his wasn't. She held his gaze across the Hogsmeade street. "We know," said the look. "We have always known. And we are not afraid of you." He moved. Not toward Harry, toward her, which she had factored into the plan as a 40% probability and had positioned accordingly. 2 steps toward her, and Dumbledore's people were there, 3 of them, appearing from nothing with the specific competence of people who had been doing this for 30 years. The confrontation was brief and professional. Not Senior was not a man who made futile resistances once the situation clarified. He was taken into custody with the quiet efficiency of a ministry operation that had been waiting for exactly this. Harry was beside her 30 seconds later, moving through the street with the particular gait she'd identified over 2 years of watching him, that quality of moving toward things rather than away. 70%, she said. What? My original confidence was 70%. I'd like to revise it to 90. He looked at her for a moment. Then the full smile, not almost, not the corner of the mouth, but genuinely and completely. What was the other 10? I always reserve 10 for unknown variables. Smart. Obviously. He reached out and tucked a loose piece of her hair back, which was not a planned action and registered in the compact signal like a struck chord. She looked at him. He's going to have consequences, Harry said. With Voldemort. If not Senior's compromised, he'll blame Theo, she said. Theo knows that. He knew it when he decided. Harry was quiet for a moment. We should look after him. I intend to, she said. Daphne appeared at Astoria's shoulder with the timing of someone who had been watching from exactly the right distance and had decided exactly the right moment had arrived. Shopping, she said. Both of you. You're going to stand in the middle of Hogsmeade looking at each other until someone photographs it. Let them photograph it, Astoria said. Daphne looked at her. Something in her elder sister's composure shifted, just slightly, just enough. She looked at Harry, then back at Astoria, and nodded once, with the particular quality of a nod that meant, good. Finally. Honeydukes, Daphne said. Come on. They went to Honeydukes and Daphne bought chocolate, and Harry discovered that Astoria had strong opinions about sugar quills versus Bertie Bott's that he found extremely entertaining, and the December afternoon moved over them with its cold Scottish light. The compact settled in Astoria's chest like something that had stopped waiting and started being. She walked back to the castle between Harry and Daphne in the late afternoon, the frost-covered road white under a sky that had gone the particular pewter grey of Scottish winter, and felt, without reservation or caveat, that she was exactly where she had decided to be. Chapter 5. The choice 6th year arrived like a door opening onto a room that had always been there but that nobody had wanted to enter. The war wasn't coming anymore. It was here. It had moved from the newspaper's careful euphemisms into the actual texture of daily life, the way people walked faster in the streets of Hogsmeade, the way the Prophet's front page had stopped trying to reassure anyone, the way the adults at Hogwarts carried themselves with the specific quality of people who were managing information they decided the students weren't ready for and were increasingly unsure that assessment was correct. Astoria was 15 and had been ready for the information for approximately 3 years. She arrived at King's Cross on September 1st with a trunk she'd packed with methodical precision and a mind already running through the year's variables. The blood curse had been quiet since April, which was good, and she intended to treat it as good without reading false security into it, because false security was just fear in a nicer outfit. She had her coursework mapped through June. She had her DA practice schedule already mentally drafted. She had, somewhere in the organized landscape of everything she was managing, a conversation she needed to have with Harry that she'd been drafting and discarding versions of since July. She found Daphne on the platform first, which was usual, and Daphne looked at her with the comprehensive attention of a sister who had been watching Astoria Greengrass navigate the world since she was old enough to observe it. "You look like you've been thinking too hard all summer," Daphne said. "I always think too hard." "You look like you've been thinking too hard about something specific." Astoria looked at her elder sister, 17 now, composed and certain in the way she'd been building toward since first year. "I need to tell Harry something," she said. "Something I've been," she stopped. "Working up to isn't the right phrase." "Deciding," Daphne said. "Deciding," Astoria agreed. "Yes." Daphne looked at her for a long moment. "Is it something good or something complicated?" "Both," Astoria said. "In the way that the most important things usually are." Daphne nodded. She didn't push, which was one of the specific things Astoria valued about her. She said, "Tell him before October. Don't let it go long enough that it becomes a thing." "I know." "And Astoria." Daphne's voice was quieter. "Don't manage it. Just tell him." Astoria thought about this on the train, sitting with a charms text she wasn't reading while the countryside moved past her window and the compartment filled with the ambient noise of a returning school year. Don't manage it. She was aware that this was her specific failure mode, the tendency to turn everything important into a project, to systematize the things that were most true because systematizing felt like control and control felt like safety. She'd been doing it since she was 7 years old and found out about the curse by reading her mother's notes and decided the appropriate response was to become the most informed person in the room. Harry knocked on her compartment door at 2:30, which she'd half expected because he found her on the train the same way he found her most places, by the compact signal, which he still didn't mention directly but which she could tell he used with the easy familiarity of someone who'd stopped questioning a sense they'd had for 6 years. He came in and sat across from her and she put the book down and looked at him. 6th year had done something to him. The summer had. He was 16 and he'd grown into himself in a way that was difficult to articulate but impossible to miss, not taller exactly, or not only, but more settled in his space, more certain of the ground under him. He'd spent the summer with Sirius and Remus doing things she knew about in outline from letters and fully in detail from the conversations they'd had in the DA last year, and whatever those things were, they'd landed in him as capability rather than weight. He looked at her. She looked back. "Good summer," he said. "Productive. Yours?" "Complicated." He paused. "Sirius is more careful than he used to be. Whatever happened in the Department of Mysteries last year," he stopped. She'd read about the Department of Mysteries in his letters. She knew the shape of it. "He's still serious. He's just less reckless," she said. "Marginally," Harry said. "Maybe." She almost smiled. The train ran through a tunnel and the compartment went briefly dark and she felt the compact signal in the sudden absence of light the way you feel a sound more clearly when the visual input drops. "I need to tell you something," she said, when the light came back. "Okay," he said. "That's simple. That present." She'd drafted 17 versions of this. She discarded all of them, because Daphne was right, and instead said the thing directly. "I've known for a while that what I feel about you isn't the compact. That it hasn't been the compact for at least 2 years. I've been careful about saying that clearly, because I wanted to be certain I was choosing rather than being led, and I needed to do that work myself without," she paused, "without it becoming something I said in a moment rather than something I decided." He was very still. "I've decided," she said. "I'm saying it so you know." He looked at her for a long moment. The train moved through the open countryside, gold in the early September light. She held his gaze and didn't manage her expression because she'd promised herself she wasn't going to do that, and the thing that happened on her face when she was telling the most true version of something was just going to have to be what it was. "I've known since third year," he said, "that it wasn't the compact for me." "I know," she said. "You know?" I could feel the difference. In the signal. She paused. "The compact has a specific quality, a recognition warmth, like an acknowledgement. What you feel is different. She searched for the word. Yours. I could tell when it was yours." He was quiet for a moment. "Could you tell when I was going to say something and then didn't?" "Often," she said. "Yes." He exhaled. "I wanted you to get there without me pushing," he said. "I didn't want it to be, I didn't want you to feel like you were catching up to where I already was. I wanted it to be mutual." "It is," she said. "That's what I'm telling you." He reached across the small space between them and took her hand, the same way he'd done in December, that quiet unremarkable warmth. "I know it is," he said. "I'm saying it's been mutual for longer than I've been comfortable admitting." "Don't be embarrassed," she said. "I'm not embarrassed." "You have the face you make when you're embarrassed." "I don't have a face for," he stopped. She raised an eyebrow. He laughed. "Fine. Yes. That's the face." "It's a reasonable face," she said. "I'm not bothered by it." "Good," he said. "Because I'm extremely bothered by yours." She looked at him. "When you're being honest about something and you're not managing it," he said, your face does something. I've been trying not to react to it for 2 years and I'm very tired." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Stop trying." He did. Hogwarts under Snape's headmastership and the Carrow's presence was a different institution from the one Astoria had arrived at in September 1991. The change had been gradual and then sudden, the way all important changes moved, and the school that met them in 6th year had the texture of an occupied place, which it was. She assessed the situation in the first week with the methodical eye she developed for hostile environments, because a school with Death Eater teachers and an increasingly unstable ministry backing the curriculum was a hostile environment, and pretending otherwise was how people got hurt. The Carrows were blunt instruments. Amicus taught dark arts with the enthusiasm of someone who had waited a long time to be given formal permission, and Alecto taught Muggle studies with a contempt that she made no effort to dress as anything else. They were dangerous not because they were intelligent, they were, in Astoria's assessment, aggressively mediocre, but because they had institutional authority backing their mediocrity, which was its own category of threat. Snape as headmaster was a different calculation. Snape was not a blunt instrument. She'd watched him for 5 years and assembled a picture of him that was considerably more complex than the standard Slytherin-Gryffindor binary his reputation occupied. She was not, as of September, certain which side of the line he was actually on, but she was certain that the line existed and that he was aware of it. She told Harry this in a letter. They were writing more than ever now, with the castle's social geography making casual meetings complicated in new ways. "Snape is playing something longer than it looks. I can't tell you what, but don't treat him as simply an enemy. Watch the specific things he does, the things he prevents, not just the things he allows. The pattern of permission and restriction tells you more than the surface." Harry's reply was measured, which meant he'd thought about it. "I've been watching him. You're right that it doesn't add up cleanly. I'm not trusting him. But I'm noting what you said." The DA reconvened in October under new operational parameters that Neville Longbottom had established over the summer with a careful competence that impressed Astoria significantly. Neville had grown in ways that were easy to overlook if you were only watching the obvious metrics. He was still not elegant, still not the person you'd write about in The Prophet, but he'd found something bedrock in himself, and he was using it without fuss or announcement. She told him so in the corridor after the first session. He looked at her with the mild surprise he tended to show when people said something directly positive to him. "Thanks," he said. You're good in there. Better than most of the 6th years. I've been practicing since 4th year, she said. I know. Harry told us. He paused. He talks about you. Not, he seemed to recalibrate, not specifically. But you come up. When he's thinking something through. She held this information quietly. He's useful like that, she said. When you're thinking something through. Yeah. Neville's expression had the particular quality of someone recognizing something true that they'd been around long enough to observe. He is. October moved through its paces and then November arrived, and with it the thing she'd been watching the horizon for since September. The blood curse flared on a Wednesday. Not quietly, the way it sometimes did, the cold thread, the brief dimming, manageable. This was different in quality, broader and sharper simultaneously, a full systemic episode that she recognized from the literature as a Category 2 escalation. She was in the middle of a potions lesson and she felt it arrive, and she sat very still and finished the potion she was making with hands that she held steady by force of will, and walked to Madame Pomfrey afterward with the composed efficiency of a person who had protocols for exactly this. Pomfrey knew about the curse. She'd known since Astoria's 3rd year, when Astoria had come to her with a detailed medical history and the specific request that the healer treat her as an informed patient rather than a child who needed information managed for her comfort. Pomfrey had looked at her for a moment and then said, "All right," with the particular respect of a medical professional recognizing a patient who understood their own situation. She was in the hospital wing for 2 days. She sent Harry a letter on the first day, brief, factual, what had happened and that she was being treated and that she would be out by Thursday. She did not underplay it and she did not dramatize it because she'd promised herself she wouldn't do either. He appeared at the hospital wing that evening. Pomfrey let him in because Pomfrey, for all her professional formality, had a keen eye for what people actually needed and had clearly decided that what Astoria needed and what the rules permitted were different problems. He came in and sat in the chair beside her bed with the directness of someone who had simply decided he was going to be there and didn't need the decision explained. "You should be in the common room," she said. "Probably," he said. "Pomfrey will throw you out." She said 9 o'clock. She looked at him. He looked back. He had the expression she'd learned to love precisely because it was never performed, the face he made when he was being simply present in an uncomfortable situation rather than managing it or retreating from it. "I'm fine," she said. "I know. You told me." He paused. What did it feel like? Nobody asked her that. The healers asked her about symptom patterns and duration and intensity on a clinical scale. Her parents asked if she was comfortable. Daphne asked if she needed anything. Nobody asked what it felt like. "Like a frequency shift," she said. "My magic does its specific thing, it accumulates, systematizes, connects. And the curse is," she searched for it. "The opposite of that. It's dispersal. The curse tries to disperse what my magic is doing. A Category 2 episode is when it's winning temporarily." He was listening with his whole attention, which was his specific quality. "Does it hurt?" "Not exactly. It's more like," she paused. "You know when you're flying and you hit unexpected turbulence? Not a crash, not even a fall, but the moment of wrongness before you stabilize?" "Yes," he said. "Exactly that. Like that. Sustained." He was quiet for a moment. "The Patronus," he said. "What about it?" "When I cast it, the Dementors are trying to take everything that makes you you. Take the light and leave the dark. The Patronus pushes back by," he paused, "by being the thing they're trying to take. By being the core of it completely." She looked at him. "You think the principle applies?" "I think, your magic accumulates. The curse disperses. What if you pushed the accumulation harder instead of trying to hold against the dispersal? Instead of the turbulence metaphor, you lean into the direction of flight." She stared at him. She turned it over in her mind with the speed she turned things over when the thing was genuinely interesting. "That's not in any of the literature," she said. "No," he agreed. "It's theoretically coherent," she said slowly. "The curse is a countering agent, it responds to the specific signature of my magic by opposing it. If I intensified the signature instead of conserving it, it might overshoot the target." She stopped. "How did you think of that?" "You told me about your magic 3 years ago," he said. "Accumulates, systematizes, connects. I've been thinking about it on and off since." He paused. "I should have said something sooner." "You're saying it now," she said. "Is it useful?" She looked at him. "Harry. It might be very useful." She was already running the implications forward, the theory branching into application possibilities. "I need to talk to the healer. I need to test it in a controlled, Astoria." "What? You're in a hospital bed." She stopped. She looked at him. He had the expression that was closest to fond, not indulgent, not soft, but genuinely delighted by something that was specifically her. "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow," she agreed, which was a concession she made because he'd just potentially given her something genuinely significant and it seemed appropriate to meet that with at least the appearance of rest. He stayed until 9 o'clock. They talked about everything except the war, which was itself a kind of luxury, pure talk, the kind they'd always had in letters and had increasingly in person, the conversation that moved across 17 topics because both of them were interested in everything and the intersection of their interests was large. At 9 o'clock Pomfrey appeared in the doorway with the expression of someone who was going to enforce a rule they'd technically already enforced once and would now enforce again. Harry stood. At the door he turned. "I'll be in the library tomorrow at 4 if you're out." "I'll be out," she said. He nodded and left and she lay in the hospital wing with the residue of the curse still threading coldly through her and the new idea bright in her mind and thought about what he'd said. The library at 4. 6 years of finding each other there, through everything. She thought it was possibly the place that meant most to her in the whole castle, and not because of the books. Well, partly because of the books. She was out Thursday morning and in the library at 4, and the idea they developed over the following 3 weeks was, tentatively, carefully, with the appropriate caveats, promising. The healer she'd been working with for 2 years was initially skeptical and then carefully intrigued, which was the response of an intelligent person encountering a genuine novel approach. The theory required testing she couldn't do during term, but the theoretical framework was solid, and she had it mapped by November's end. She wrote to her mother about it. Her mother wrote back with the kind of warmth that contained years of held fear being exhaled. "Your father wants to know if Mr. Potter would consider coming for Christmas." She showed Harry the letter in the corridor. He read it twice. "Your father," he said. "My father," she confirmed. "The man who tried to dissolve the compact. Considered trying to dissolve the compact. There's a distinction." She paused. "He's been different since December last year. Since the knot situation. She thought about how to say it. He revised his position. He does that, he revises slowly and then completely." Harry was quiet for a moment. "What do you want?" "I want you to come," she said. "But only if you're comfortable. I'm not managing you." "I know you're not." He thought about it, genuinely, not reflexively. "Yes," he said. "If he's willing, yes." "He's asking," she said. "That's more than willing." The Christmas holidays were unlike any she'd had before, which was its own kind of significant. She'd had Harry in letters for 7 years. She'd had him in corridors and classrooms and the DA and the library for 2. She'd had him at the lakeside and in Hogsmeade and in the room of requirement and in the hospital wing. She hadn't had him at the Greengrass estate in Wiltshire, sitting at the long family table under the chandelier her grandmother had charmed to produce a warm gold light, drinking tea, and making her father reconsider everything he'd thought he knew about Harry Potter. That part she hadn't entirely planned, but it happened anyway. Cyrus Greengrass and Harry Potter were, she observed over the first 2 days with the analytical pleasure of watching a genuinely unexpected interaction, more similar than either of them would have been comfortable knowing. Both of them were direct to the point that it sometimes registered as bluntness. Both of them said what they meant and meant what they said and found people who didn't do the same slightly baffling. Both of them had an intelligence that operated primarily on pattern recognition. They noticed the things other people missed and they didn't make a performance of noticing. The first real conversation happened on the second day, after dinner, when her mother and Daphne had gone to the sitting room and Astoria was in the hall with a book and her father and Harry were left at the table with the remains of the meal and apparently neither of them had decided to move yet. She could hear them from the hall because the hall door was open and she had decided to leave it open. "You know what I thought of you," her father said. "Blood status concerns," Harry said, without apparent rancor. "Political complications. My specific situation. All of that." Cyrus was quiet for a moment. "I was wrong about some of it and right about some of it and wrong about what mattered most. The compact doesn't change who you are. I was using it as a lens and it was the wrong lens." "What's the right lens?" "What you actually are," Cyrus said. "Which is, not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Something louder," Cyrus said. "Someone performing heroism." Harry was quiet for a moment. "That sounds exhausting," he said. "It does," Cyrus agreed. And then, and this was what she heard that she hadn't expected, her father laughed. Brief and genuine, the laugh he only used when something had surprised him into it. She went back to her book. On the fourth day, her father took Harry to the estate library and she stayed deliberately in the sitting room with her mother and Daphne and let them have it, because some conversations needed to happen without her managing them. An hour later Harry came to find her in the sitting room with an expression she couldn't fully decode, something thoughtful and slightly complicated. "Your family library," he said. "Yes. It's extraordinary." "I know. Your father showed me the Greengrass family history. The full history." He paused. "Aldrich Greengrass. What about him?" "He wasn't, your father said he wasn't a particularly political figure. That the compact was genuinely philosophical. He actually believed it." "I've always known that," she said. "I read his original text." "I know. But seeing it in context, the full family record," Harry paused. "It makes it more real somehow. He wrote the compact because he'd found someone and he wanted the magic to recognize it so clearly that nothing political could unrecognize it later." She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "That's exactly what he did. Smart man. He had good instincts," she said. Harry looked at her with that full expression, the unperformed one. "Astoria." "What?" "I'm glad you fell," he said. "At the ministry. When you were 9. He paused. "Not that you hurt yourself. But that I know what you mean," she said. "Good," he said, "because I've been trying to say that for 3 years and I keep, Harry," she said. "What?" "Stop talking." He did. She kissed him, properly, in the sitting room of the Greengrass estate in the gold light of the chandelier while her mother made a polite sound from somewhere in the direction of the door that meant she'd seen and had decided to gracefully relocate. January brought them back to Hogwarts and the war brought itself to them. It was in everything now, the Daily Prophet running fear as a background frequency, the owls that carried bad news arriving in multiples, the absences at the house tables that multiplied weekly. She tracked the casualty reports with the same systematic attention she gave to everything important, and the names she recognized grew in frequency until she made herself stop recognizing them and just count instead. Daphne was still at Hogwarts, in her 7th year, and the Greengrass sisters navigated the occupied school with the precision of people who had been raised to manage hostile social environments and had each, in their different ways, sharpened that skill to a point. Daphne managed the Slytherin house politics with the cool authority she'd been building since first year. Astoria managed the DA's continued operation and her own coursework and the ongoing theoretical work on the curse treatment and, underneath all of it, the continuous assessment of when the endgame was coming and what shape it would take. Because she was building a picture. She was always building a picture. The Horcrux angle had been in the picture since fourth year, when she'd assembled it from fragments, the diary at the chamber, the specific quality of Voldemort's return, the things that didn't add up about a magical signature that had survived death. She'd never said the word Horcrux to Harry because she hadn't known the word, but she'd described the shape of the thing in a letter 2 years ago and he'd written back, "How do you know about that?" Which confirmed he already knew. "You've been doing this for 2 years, she'd written. "Dumbledore," he'd replied. "Since 5th year." "How many?" A long pause. "We think 7. We're down to 3 or 4. I'll tell you everything when I can do it in person." She'd held that letter for a long time. 7 anchors for a soul that refused to stay dead. The scale of it, the deliberate construction of immortality at the cost of the most fundamental violation possible, told her everything she needed to know about Voldemort as an intelligence. Not the propaganda, not the Dark Lord mythology. The actual shape of the mind, a person who feared death so absolutely that they dismembered their own soul to avoid it. She found this, in a specific way, clarifying. Fear of that magnitude was not power. It was the opposite. And something built on the foundation of absolute fear was, structurally, less stable than it appeared. She told Harry this in the library in February. He looked at her for a long moment. "I've thought something like that," he said. "But I haven't heard someone else say it." "It changes the strategic picture," she said. "If the Horcruxes are his attempt to make his fear permanent, to make it structural, then destroying them isn't just weakening him magically. It's destroying the architecture of the fear itself. Each one that goes makes the whole edifice less stable. Which means he becomes less predictable." "Which means he becomes less predictable," she confirmed. "And less predictable can be more dangerous in the short term. But structurally, he's already lost. He just doesn't know it yet." Harry was quiet. She could feel the compact signal doing what it did when he was working through something that mattered, that sharpening quality, that particular focus. "There's something I haven't told you," he said. "About the Horcruxes." She waited. "There's one that's not an object." He held her gaze. "It happened when he killed my parents. He made one accidentally. It attached to the nearest living magical vessel." She understood it before he finished the sentence. She understood it and she sat with it for the 3 seconds she allowed herself and then she put it behind glass and thought about it clearly. "You," she said. "Me. Since you were 1 year old." "Yes." The library was quiet. A candle guttered. She breathed. "Does it affect you?" she asked. "Day to day." "Does it? I don't know," he said honestly. "I can't separate what's me from what's," he stopped. "I've thought about it. Dumbledore thinks it has to be," he didn't finish the sentence. She knew what the end of it was. She'd known as soon as he said it. She'd been building a picture, and that piece, clicked into place, completed a section she hadn't been able to resolve until now. She put her hand on the table between them, not reaching for his, just placing it there, present. "Tell me what Dumbledore said," she said. "The full version." "Whatever he told you." He told her. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting, the prophecy, the way it connected to the Horcrux, what Dumbledore believed had to happen. She listened and didn't manage her face and felt the thing it did and let it do that. When he finished she was quiet for a moment. "The Horcrux in you," she said. "What destroys Horcruxes is destruction of the container. But you're not just the container. If something happened to you and the Horcrux, if there was a way to destroy what's in you without destroying, Dumbledore thinks the killing curse might do it, Harry said quietly. Destroy the piece of Voldemort without killing me. Might. Might, she said. Yes. She looked at him. And you've decided you're going to let it happen. It wasn't a question. She knew the answer before she asked it because she knew him. I haven't decided anything, he said, which was technically true and not entirely true. Harry. I know what you're going to say. Do you? You're going to tell me there's another way. That we should look harder. That, I'm going to tell you, she said quietly, that if you have decided, I'd rather know than not know. And that if you're still deciding, I'd like to help you think through it rather than have you think through it alone. She held his gaze. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. He looked at her for a long moment. Something in his expression changed, that thing it did when he was being given something he hadn't expected. I haven't decided, he said, and this time she believed it was the full truth. I've been sitting next to it for a year. I haven't decided. Then we'll sit next to it together, she said. Until you have to. It might be soon. I know. Are you afraid? He asked. She thought about it genuinely, the way she thought about the honest version of things. Not of what happens to me, she said. I've been at peace with the curse for a long time. My version of not wasting time is, I know I'm doing the right things with the time I have. What I'm afraid of is you deciding alone. She paused. Don't do that. Whatever you decide. Don't do it alone. He reached across the table and took her hand where it rested. I won't, he said. She believed him. She'd learned over 7 years that Harry Potter said very few things he didn't mean. April came and the castle's tension reached the frequency it had been building toward all year, the specific vibration of something that has been stretched and is approaching its limit. She felt it in the DA sessions, the preparation shifting from practice to something more purposeful. She felt it in the way Neville ran the organization, the same quiet certainty she'd noticed in September now running at a higher register. She felt it in Harry's letters, which were coming less frequently because he was moving, she understood, toward the last stage of something. The last letter arrived in May. Astoria. I'm going. We've found the last one. After this, the big one, the one at Hogwarts. Dumbledore says the end is at Hogwarts, which is why it's always been Hogwarts, I think. Everything important about this has been there. I've decided. About the Horcrux piece. I know what I have to do and I know I might be wrong about coming back and I know you know that too. I'm not deciding alone. I'm telling you this so you know it was decided with you, even if you're not there. You've been in every piece of thinking I've done for 3 years. That's not a small thing. The compact, whatever it is now, after everything, it's not the reason. You know that. I know you know that. Come to Hogwarts. When it starts, be there. Not because I need you to be. Because I want you to be. She read the letter twice. She folded it once, carefully, and put it in the box. She went to find Daphne. Her sister was in the Slytherin common room, and she looked up when Astoria came in with the expression of someone who has also been waiting. It's time, Astoria said. I know, Daphne said. I'm going to Hogwarts. We're going to Hogwarts, Daphne said, standing. Don't even start. Astoria looked at her sister, 17 years old, composed and certain and absolutely there, and felt something so large she didn't have language for it. Daphne, she said. Don't, Daphne said, with the tone she used when sentiment was correct, but she wasn't going to be able to maintain her composure if someone articulated it. Just come on. They went. Chapter 6, The Compact fulfilled. The Battle of Hogwarts announced itself the way all final things do, not with the drama the stories would assign it later, but with a sound. A low, resonant impact that moved through the castle's stone like a word being spoken in a language older than any of its inhabitants. Astoria felt it in the soles of her feet before she heard it with her ears. She and Daphne had arrived at Hogsmeade an hour before it began, using a contact of her father's who moved people through the protective enchantments the way a surgeon moves through a body, precisely, without unnecessary damage to the surrounding structure. Cyrus Greengrass had arranged it. He'd also arranged, Astoria noted, to be standing at the edge of Hogsmeade with his wife when they arrived, which was not something she'd planned for and which landed in her chest with a specific weight. Her father in his traveling robes, not his formal ones. Her mother with her wand already in her hand. "Father," she said. "We're coming," Cyrus said. It was not a discussion. She looked at him, this man she'd been reading like a text since she was old enough to read, this careful and complicated and proud man who had spent 6 years being wrong about the most important thing and had, in his own precise way, corrected course. He was looking at her with an expression she'd seen developing over the last year, something that had been there since Christmas and had continued growing, not apology anymore, which was the previous version, but something more complete. Recognition. "All right," she said. They walked to Hogwarts through the April night, the 5 of them, and the castle ahead was already lit in ways it shouldn't have been, upper windows blazing with something that wasn't lamplight. The passage through the one-eyed which led them into the corridor below the castle proper, and from there the sounds resolved into specifics, not a single impact now but many, the distributed percussion of a battle in its early stages, the crack and boom of spellfire and the structural responses of a building that had been defending itself for centuries and was now doing so in earnest. Astoria stopped at the junction of the lower corridor and the main castle. She put her hand on the stone wall and felt the castle's specific magic, accumulated and layered, 1,000 years of intention, and oriented herself. "The Great Hall first," she said. "That's where the coordination is. Minerva McGonagall will be running it from there, she'll want every capable person she can get." "The DA," Daphne said. "The DA will be already deployed." She looked at Daphne. "Neville's running ground operations. He'll have the corridors. What McGonagall needs is people who can manage the spaces he can't." "The hospital wing," her mother said quietly. "They'll need people at the hospital wing." "Yes." She looked at her mother, Astoria Greengrass, who had spent 15 years managing a blood curse diagnosis by being the most competent and composed person in every room that contained it. "Can you manage that?" "Yes," her mother said, with a steadiness that answered more than the question. "Father." She looked at Cyrus. "The entry points. The Death Eaters will push 3 main approaches, the main gates, the Whomping Willow side, and the Boathouse passage. McGonagall will have the gates and the Willow covered. The Boathouse is less obvious and will be underdefended." Cyrus looked at her. "How do you know that?" "I've been mapping Hogwarts' defensive topology since 3rd year," she said. "The Boathouse passage was built in 1782 and isn't in the primary defensive schema. It's the structural gap." She paused. "Take whoever McGonagall assigns you and cover the Boathouse. Don't let them through." He looked at her for a moment with an expression she didn't have time to fully read. Then he said, "Your instincts are right." He touched her face briefly, the way he hadn't since she was small. "Be careful." "I'm always careful." She went up into the castle, Daphne one step behind her. The Great Hall was organized chaos, organized being the operative word, because McGonagall had the situation in her considerable hands and was deploying people with the efficiency of someone who had been preparing for this possibility since the last time it was a possibility. The hall held fighters, students, faculty, and a scattering of people who'd come from outside through the various passages that Neville's network had maintained. Harry was not there. She felt the compact signal, not the warm directional certainty of the last 2 years, but something taut and pointed, too specific to be comfortable. Somewhere above her. Moving. She found McGonagall at the head of the hall. "Miss Greengrass." McGonagall's expression registered her presence with the same controlled efficiency it registered everything tonight. "You're not a student here at present." "I'm a student at Hogwarts," she said. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." She held the professor's gaze. "Where do you need me?" McGonagall looked at her for the 2 seconds she gave to assessments she already knew the answer to. "The 4th floor east corridor. There's a structural breach, the Death Eaters are pushing through it. I have 3 7th years there and they need someone who can hold a reinforcement ward." "I can hold a reinforcement ward," Astoria said. "I know you can," McGonagall said, which was possibly the most compressed version of high praise the professor had ever deployed. "Go." Daphne went with her because Daphne went with her, and there was no version of this night in which Daphne Greengrass stayed in the Great Hall while her sister went to a structural breach on the 4th floor. The 4th floor east corridor was exactly as described, a section of wall where something very large and very forceful had impacted the exterior, cracking the stone and opening a gap that was currently being used as an entry point by 3 Death Eaters who were pressing against the 7th-year students' defensive line with the systematic pressure of people who had been in battles before. Astoria assessed it in 4 seconds. The breach was structural, which meant the spell approach needed to be architectural rather than purely combative, reinforcing the stone itself rather than just shielding the gap. She'd read the theory of structural enchantment in her 2nd year during a personal project on castle magic. She'd never cast it under pressure. She cast it. The reinforcement ward went up in a surge that surprised her with its own speed, her magic accumulating and connecting in exactly the way it was designed to do, pulling the castle's existing enchantments into the framework and using them as scaffolding. The wall didn't close, but it braced, and the breach held at its current dimensions rather than widening. The Death Eaters on the other side shifted tactics. One of them was skilled, genuinely skilled, not relying on authority or fear but on actual technical competence, and he hit the ward with a dismantling sequence that Astoria recognized from the dark arts theory she'd read in the family library. "Daphne," she said. "I see it," Daphne said, already moving. What followed was not the theatrical duel of legend. It was 2 sisters working in the tight and unglamorous geometry of a narrow corridor, holding a line against people who were trying to break it, using every piece of practical knowledge they'd accumulated between them. Daphne's wand work was flawless. She'd spent 7 years making it flawless, the same way she'd spent 7 years making everything about her presentation flawless, and the result was a defensive capability that complemented Astoria's structural work with the precision of something long rehearsed. They held the breach for 40 minutes. The skilled Death Eater fell back. The other 2 followed. The 7th years at the far end of the corridor were breathing hard and looking at the Greengrass sisters with the expression of people who have just revised a category. "Good," said one of them, Seamus Finnegan, she recognized, from years of seeing him in the DA. "That was really, don't stop moving," Astoria said. "It's not done." She felt the compact signal spike. Not direction this time. Depth. Like something going quiet that had been loud, a signal dropping, and then, nothing. A complete absence where there had always been a frequency. She stood very still. "Astoria," Daphne said. "Something happened," she said. "To Harry." She said it flat and factual because that was the only way she could say it and still be standing. Something happened. The nothing in her chest where the signal had been was not like silence. It was like a room she'd been in for 7 years that had suddenly gone dark. She knew the room. She knew every surface of it. And the dark was not the same as the room being gone. She was moving before she'd made a conscious decision, which was something Harry did, she noted distantly, and had apparently become something she did too. "Astoria." Daphne caught her arm. "If he's not," she said. She said it with a certainty that was not the compact's certainty because the compact was gone. This was hers. "He's not gone." Something happened to the signal. Not to him. She held Daphne's gaze. "The Horcrux," she said. "If the piece in him was destroyed, Daphne understood it in one beat. The compact would feel the change. The compact is keyed to our magical signatures. His signature just changed. She looked toward the castle's interior, toward wherever he was. He changed. Not gone. Changed. Daphne let go of her arm. She went. The castle was a battlefield and she moved through it the way she'd always moved through complex environments, with attention and economy and the specific awareness of someone who had mapped the space thoroughly enough to find the fastest routes through the chaos. She went through the 4th floor, down the main staircase when it cooperated and the back stairs when it didn't, through the 2nd floor corridor where someone had put up a barricade that she went around, and out through the main entrance onto the grounds. The grounds were vast and dark and full of motion. She oriented by the compass that wasn't working in its normal way, trying to find him by the secondary means she'd always had, by knowing where he'd be, not by magic but by knowing him. He was heading for the forest. She knew it the way she knew when his handwriting changed, the way she knew when a letter had been written at 3 in the morning. He was going to the forest because that was where the thing he'd decided led. She stopped at the forest's edge. She didn't go in. She stood there for the longest minutes she could remember standing anywhere, and she held herself completely still, and she did not follow him into the forest because she'd thought about it and she knew what following him in would do. It would make his decision about her, and it was not about her, and it needed to not be about her for it to be real. So she stood at the edge. She felt the moment it happened the way you feel a sound you can't hear, in the bones before the ears. Something fundamental. Something irrevocable. The knot signal in her chest went from the quality of a room with the lights off to the quality of a room that has been remade, walls moved, windows opened where there were none. She breathed. She waited. She counted her own heartbeats because counting was something she could do. She got to 423. He came out of the forest. He came out alive and walking, and there was something different about the way he was moving, not injured exactly, or not only, but recalibrated, like someone who has been somewhere and come back and the somewhere has changed their specific gravity. He was alive. He was upright. He was looking at the castle with the expression of someone who has just had the plan work and is catching up to the fact. She said nothing. She stood at the edge of the tree line and waited for him to find her. He found her the way he always found her. He turned before he could have seen her with his eyes, turned with the accuracy of the signal that wasn't what it had been but was something new, something that was finding its shape. He stopped. They were 10 meters apart. The castle was still fighting behind them, the night still full of the noise of it, and none of that was where either of them was. "You're here," he said. "I'm here," she said. He crossed the 10 meters and she let him, and he put both arms around her and she put hers around him, and she felt his heartbeat against hers and felt the new quality of his magical signature, the absence of the piece that wasn't his, the clarity of what was left, which was so specifically and precisely him that it registered in her chest like a returning frequency resolving into something pure. "I'm here," he said again, into her hair, which was his version of saying something he didn't have other words for. "I know," she said. "I counted." "What?" "I counted my heartbeats while I waited." 423. She felt him breathe out, a long, complicated exhalation. "Only you," he said. "Only me," she agreed. She let go first, because there was still a battle happening and she was not a person who stood in one place while there was work to do. She stepped back and looked at him properly, cataloging damage, which was instinct, alive and upright and changed and intact. "The signal's different," she said. "I know. I can feel it." He looked at her with the new quality in his expression, the post-forest quality. "Is it wrong?" "No," she said. "It's cleaner. The Horcrux piece, the compact must have been reading around it for years. Now it's just you." "Just me," he said. "That's not a small thing," she said. He almost smiled. "No," he said. "It's not." They went back to the castle. Voldemort's death happened in the Great Hall, and Astoria was there for it. She was there, not at the center of it. That space belonged to Harry and to the particular finality that had been building toward him since he was 1 year old, but she was present, standing at the edge of the hall with Daphne, watching. She watched him face Voldemort across the cleared space of the hall, surrounded by the watching dead and living of a war that had run 20 years. She watched him speak, and she could see from where she stood that he was doing the thing he always did, which was being simply and completely himself in the most important moment. No performance, no theatrical heroism, just Harry Potter telling the truth in plain language. She'd been in love with him for years. She knew exactly when she'd known it. It had been the letter about the basilisk sword, when she was 11, when she'd sat on the floor of the Slytherin dormitory in the early morning and felt something shift past the intellectual and become something else. She'd spent 3 years being certain enough about it to decide, and she'd decided, and standing here now at the edge of the Great Hall watching him be exactly who he'd always been, she found she had no interest in revising that decision. The Elder Wand's final spell rebounded. Tom Riddle fell. Harry caught the wand. The hall was still for 1 second, the particular stillness of a very large held breath being released all at once. Then the noise came. She stood in it and let it move past her and watched Harry stand in the middle of it, looking slightly lost in the way he looked when the attention was large and concentrated and he had no task to perform within it. He was looking across the hall, over the heads of the people pressing toward him. He was looking for her. She found his eyes. "I'm here," said hers. The compact signal, changed, clean, nothing in it but them, said everything else. The days after the battle were the particular chaos of aftermath, which is different from the chaos of conflict in that it has no momentum to carry you. It requires sitting still with things, and sitting still with things was harder than most of the people who were good at fighting found it to be. She sat with things. She was, as she'd always been, better at the sitting still than most people expected. She helped with the hospital wing, which her mother had managed through the battle with the same composed competence she brought to everything, and where the volume of work was sufficient to occupy everyone available for 4 days. She helped with the organizational documentation that the ministry, in its sudden, scrambling rush to establish that it had been on the right side all along, required in quantities that suggested no one in the ministry had any idea what to do with a war's ending. She also slept, when she could, in a spare room in the castle that Pomfrey had designated for family members who needed to remain on the premises. Daphne slept in the bed next to hers. They woke at the same time on the second morning and lay in the early light without talking for a while, which was a mode of communication they'd been using since Astoria was 7. "Father," Daphne said finally. "He's all right," Astoria said. "I saw him this morning. He held the boathouse." "He held the boathouse," Daphne repeated, with a quality in her voice that meant she was deciding how to feel about that. "Mother?" "Fine. She's still running a hospital wing rotation." "Of course she is." Daphne was quiet. "And Harry?" Astoria looked at the ceiling. "He's in the Gryffindor Tower. He needs to be left alone for a bit, which no one is letting him be. Except you." "I'm leaving him alone on purpose," she said. "That's different. Is he all right?" She checked the signal, which she was still adjusting to in its new form. "He will be," she said. "He's processing. He does that, he needs to process alone and then he needs people. The people part will come." Daphne looked at her. "The signal tells you that?" "Knowing him tells me that." She paused. "The signal confirms it." On the 4th day, Harry found her in the library. The library was quiet and mostly empty. Most people were outside in the grounds or in the Great Hall or in the processes of leaving or arriving that the aftermath generated. The library had its own atmosphere intact, the books still on their shelves, Madame Pance's desk still precisely organized, the dust of the battle settled and the air carrying the specific quality of a space that had survived something. He sat across from her at her table, the one he'd found the first time and always found since, and she put down her book and looked at him. He looked tired. He looked, underneath the tired, like someone who had come through a very long tunnel and was standing in the light on the other side still calibrating that the light was real. He also looked, in some way that was difficult to articulate but impossible to miss, more himself than she'd ever seen him. The Horcrux piece had been in him since he was 1 year old. The absence of it was visible in a way she hadn't expected, not a lack, but a clarity. Like a photograph coming into proper focus. "Sorry I went quiet," he said. "You didn't owe me noise," she said. "I know. I wanted to, I was trying to get to the point where I wasn't going to make this about how bad it was." He paused. "Cedric. Fred Weasley. Lupin and Tonks." He said the names the way you said names when you were trying to give them their proper weight without being crushed by it. "I keep trying to figure out the right way to carry it." "There isn't one," she said. "There's just carrying it." He looked at her. "Yeah. Grief isn't a problem to solve," she said. "I know that's uncomfortable for people like us." "People like us," he said, with the warmth that moved into his expression when she said something that was specifically them. "People who solve problems," she said. "It's not applicable here. You carry it and live around it and eventually the living becomes larger than the grief, but you don't solve it." "How do you know that?" She looked at him. "I've been carrying the knowledge of my curse since I was 7, she said. "I've had practice with things that don't resolve." He was quiet. "Then, how is that? Right now?" "The curse. Stable," she said. "The theory I've been developing, your Patronus principle applied to magical signature intensity, I've been testing it. The preliminary results are promising." "How promising?" "Possibly significantly promising." She paused. "I'm not going to tell you it's solved until it's solved. But the trajectory is better than I expected when I started." Something in his expression that had been taught since he sat down loosened slightly. "Tell me the mechanism," he said. "The theory. You want the technical version?" "I want all of it." She gave him all of it. She explained the theoretical framework, the preliminary testing, the healer's responses, the areas that still needed work. He listened with his whole attention and asked 3 questions that were, as his questions always were, precisely targeted at the parts she was least certain about. She answered them honestly, including the parts where the answer was "I don't know yet." By the time she finished, they'd been sitting in the library for an hour and the afternoon light was doing the specific thing it did in late spring, long and gold and unhurried, moving across the shelves like something with time. "The compact," Harry said. "The formal acknowledgement. At 17. He looked at her steadily. "You're 15. 16 in July," she said. "I'll be 17 in July," he said. The completion phase requires acknowledgement from both parties at majority," she said. "Your majority is July 31st, mine is 2 years from July. So technically," he said, "by the compact's terms, we have 2 years. "Technically," she agreed. He looked at her. "I don't want to wait 2 years. She held his gaze. This was the thing she'd been thinking about since the grounds, since the forest's edge, since the 423 heartbeats. The compact's completion phase was a formal thing, the magic's acknowledgement that what it had recognized was real. It needed majority from both parties. But the choice was not the compact's to make. She'd known that since she was 9 years old sitting on her bedroom floor reading Astoria Greengrass's words about 2 magics that rhyme. "The formal acknowledgement is the compact's requirement," she said. "Not ours." "Right," he said. "We made our choices some time ago," she said. "We did," he agreed. "So the 2 years is a legal technicality." "That's how I see it," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. "Harry. Astoria. Ask me properly," she said. "Not the compact asking. You." He looked at her with the full expression, the one she'd stopped being careful about 2 years ago. He reached across the table and turned her hand over and held it. "When you're 17, he said. "When the time is yours to give and the choice is yours to make, will you complete it? Not because Aldrich Greengrass wrote it in 1312. Not because the magic recognized us before we recognized each other. Because you've decided." She looked at the hand holding hers. She looked at his face, which was more familiar to her than almost any other face in her life, the green eyes, the scar she'd stopped seeing as a symbol years ago, the ink he perpetually had somewhere on his left hand, the expression that was simply and completely his. She thought about the Ministry Gala and the ice sculpture and the fall that had started all of it. She thought about 43 letters before Hogwarts and the library in October of first year and the lake in February of fourth year and the hospital wing in sixth year and the forest's edge at the battle's turning point. She thought about 423 heartbeats. She thought about everything she was. Everything he was. The different shapes of their magic that had found each other in 1991 and recognized something in each other that was, as Aldrich Greengrass had written, irrevocable. "Yes," she said. The word came out with the quality she'd been developing for years, not managed, not systematized, simply true. The most direct version of the most honest thing. He brought her hand up and pressed his mouth against her knuckles in the old formal way that was actually very Harry because Harry understood, better than most people knew, the value of gestures that meant what they said. The compact signal sang. Not a needle. Not a frequency. Something warmer and more complete, a resonance that moved through her chest and settled there with the ease of something arriving home. Outside the library windows, the May evening was doing its slow golden retreat, the grounds of Hogwarts catching the last of the light in a way that made the damaged sections and the intact sections equal parts of the same thing, a place that had survived itself, that carried its history in its stones, that would stand here long after everyone in it had become part of that history. She sat in the library with Harry's hand holding hers and felt, without ambiguity or caveat, that she was doing exactly what she'd decided to do with the time she had. Which was, she thought, exactly enough. The summer came. The world rebuilt itself in the clumsy, necessary way that worlds do after they've been broken, imperfectly, with disputes about the right way to do it, with old injuries surfacing in new conversations, with occasional bursts of something that was tentatively hope. Theo not navigated his father's arrest with the specific composure of someone who had made their decision well in advance and was now living with it. He was 17 and he'd chosen a side before the choosing was visible and it had cost him the relationship with his father and he'd done it anyway. Astoria found him in Diagon Alley in June and they had a brief conversation that contained, from her side, a genuine acknowledgement of what his choice had meant. "Thank you," she said, which was something she meant and he knew it. "You built most of it," he said. "I just provided a door." "You provided a door when it cost you something," she said. "That's not nothing." He looked at her with the complicated expression he sometimes had. "Are you happy?" he asked. Not meanly. With genuine inquiry. She thought about it. "I'm exactly where I decided to be," she said. "That's my version of happy." He nodded. "Good," he said, and meant it. Daphne's 7th year ended with the highest Newt results in Slytherin in 30 years, which surprised no one who knew Daphne. She accepted a position at the Ministry, International Magical Cooperation, which was exactly where someone with Daphne Greengrass's particular combination of political intelligence and interpersonal precision belonged, and began it in September with the composed efficiency that was her specific gift. She found Astoria the evening before she started and they sat in the garden of the Kensington townhouse in the late summer evening and said the things that sisters say when they've been each other's closest witness through something large. "You were right," Daphne said. "About Harry. About everything you said to Father in July." "I know," Astoria said, without self-satisfaction, because being right about things that mattered wasn't something she felt triumphant about. "Father knows too," Daphne said. "He won't say it like that. But he knows." "He said enough at Christmas," Astoria said. That was enough. Daphne looked at her with the elder sister expression, the one that was love and assessment and time in equal measure. The curse theory, she said. Tell me it's working. It's working, Astoria said. The most recent tests are genuinely promising. The healer used the word significant last week. She doesn't use that word lightly. Harry's principle, Daphne said. Harry's principle, yes. Applied to my specific situation. She paused. He thinks in the right shapes. He was always going to think of it eventually. He thought of it for you, Daphne said. Everything useful that he does is for people he cares about, Astoria said. It's how he works. It's one of the better things about him. One of the better things. Daphne raised an eyebrow. Astoria looked out at the garden, the summer evening settling into its blue-gray close. He's the realest person I know, she said, which was what she'd told Daphne when she was 9 years old in the sitting room by the fire at the estate, after the Ministry Gala. He's real. She'd said it then and it was still the truest version. Good, Daphne said. Don't tell him I said that. I'll tell him exactly that, Astoria said. On July 31st, Harry turned 17. She was at Grimmauld Place because that was where he was. Sirius and Remus had opened it properly after the battle, had done the extensive work of making it something livable, and it was in the process of becoming a home in the way that places become homes, which is mostly by being where the right people are. The kitchen table was large enough for all of them, Sirius and Remus and Hermione and Ron and the Weasley contingent and Neville and Luna and various people who existed in the widening orbit of Harry's life. She arrived at 6 o'clock. He opened the door himself. He was 17. He was wearing the blue jumper she'd told him looked good on him in a letter, which she suspected was deliberate. He had ink on his left hand. His eyes were the green they'd always been. She looked at him for a moment on the doorstep. Happy birthday, she said. Come in, he said. She came in. The evening was loud and warm and abundant in the way evenings were when people who'd survived something came together without the shadow of the thing they'd survived. She sat at the table between Harry and Hermione and ate a cake that Molly Weasley had made and that was enormous and slightly lopsided and wonderful, and she talked to everyone and was talked to and felt the particular quality of being in a large warm room full of people who were each other's choice. After dinner, Harry found her on the Grimmauld Place stairs, the third-floor landing, slightly removed from the noise below. The compact, he said. It's your majority, she said. I can feel it. The signal had shifted at midnight, she'd noticed, or what she thought was midnight, a specific change in quality, the completion phase's first note. The compact recognizing that one of its parties had reached the threshold. It's asking, he said. I know. She looked at him. It needs both of us. 2 years, he said. 2 years, she agreed. I can wait 2 years, he said. I want to be clear about that. I'll wait exactly as long as it takes. She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about what she'd told him in the library, the formal acknowledgement is the compact's requirement, not ours. She thought about choices made well in advance of the moments they're required. She thought about Aldrich Greengrass in 1312, who had understood something about the nature of bonds that the 700 years since him had spent elaborating in complicated ways without improving on the original simplicity. I want to ask you something, she said. Okay. Not the compact asking. Me. She held his gaze. I am 15 years old and I have a blood curse and a theoretical treatment that is promising but not proven and 2 years until I can fulfill a formal ancient magical contract. I have excellent instincts and middling social skills and I organize everything I care about into systems because chaos makes me feel like I'm wasting something. I am occasionally difficult and frequently right and not especially patient with people who are neither. She paused. Do you understand what you're choosing? He looked at her for a long moment. Yes, he said. Specifically, she said, because she needed the specific version. You, he said. Specifically. She breathed. Good, she said. Because I choose you. Specifically. Not the magic. Not the compact. Not the resonance or the recognition or Astoria Greengrass's very good instincts. She held his gaze with everything she had, unmanaged and fully true. You. The person who thought about my curse and found a principle that might actually help. The person who writes letters that say exactly what he means. The person who walked into the forest alone and came back out. That person. He reached out and tucked the piece of her hair that never stayed put back behind her ear, the same gesture he'd made in Hogsmeade 2 years ago, and she felt it the same way she'd felt it then, like a struck chord, warm and specific. 2 years, he said. 2 years, she said. And then formally. And then formally. And everything in between. She looked at him. She thought about the 7 years behind them, letters and libraries and lakesides and battles and the long patient work of 2 people choosing each other in every available way before the magic had a structure to put it in. Everything in between, she said, is already decided. He kissed her on the 3rd floor landing of Grimald Place with the noise of people who loved them both coming up from below, and the compact signal did the thing it had been doing since the forest, that warm, complete resonance, something that had found its shape and settled into it with the ease of something that had always been going to end up exactly here. She kissed him back and thought that Astoria Greengrass had been right about one thing absolutely. You cannot unrhyme 2 things that already rhyme. The compact had known it in 1312. The magic had known it at the Ministry Gala in 1994. She had known it, with the precision she brought to everything, since the library in October of first year when she'd looked up from her Transfiguration essay and found Harry Potter sitting across from her like something she hadn't been looking for and had found anyway. All the magic had ever done was listen for what was already true. The rest, all of it, every letter and every choice and every year, that had been theirs.